Okay. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me clearly? All right. You're welcome to the 2024 Annual Public Lecture organized by the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria with the theme, The New National Minimum Wage, Implications for Public and Private Organizations. My name is Oluwakemi Shonubi, MCIPM, and I'll be your host for today's activity. Without further ado, we're going to start by establishing the protocol and welcoming people on board. I have the President and Chairman of the Governing Council, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gobir, FCIPM FNLI, the Vice President, Mrs. Chidinma Obiedesi, FCIPM, National Treasurer, Mrs. Ogochukwu Egbunu, FCIPM, the Registrar and Chief Executive, Ms. Oluwatoyin Naiwo, FCIPM, the immediate past President, Mr. 𝐍𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧𝐬, FCIPM, FNLI, esteemed elected and other governing council members, distinguished fellows on this call, our keynote speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD, the Chief Consultant, B. Adedipe and Associates Limited, our esteemed panelists, Comrade Issa Aremu, MNINPOM, the Director General, CEO, Imoudu, National Institute for Labor Studies, Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, MCIPM, PSLC, FITD, CMOID, FIMC. You see, it's a power-packed team. Permanent Secretary, Lagos State Ministry of Establishments and Training, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, CEO, Kryptr-Partner, Enzo, Krypton and Co., Institutional Development Committee members, members of the Institute, non-CIPM members and professional colleagues, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. Before we begin, let me state a few reminders. First and foremost, I need everyone to please mute or turn off your microphones when the speakers are presenting their discussions to avoid unnecessary noise. At this point, we would like to start this seminar with a national anthem, followed by the reading of our code of conduct by the Registrar CE of CIPM, Ms. Oluwatoyin Naiwo, FCIPM, and we then will take the welcome address by the President and Chairman of Governing Council of CIPM, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gobir, FCIPM, FNLI. We'll need support from the team on ground. Let's go with the national anthem, please. Okay, I think I can start singing. Yeah.
First stanza, okay.
In brotherhood, Nigerians of and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's now go on to the code of conduct, which will be read out by the Registrar and CE of CIPM, Ms. Oluwatoyin Naiwo, FCIPM.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am. Please go ahead.
The President and Chairman of the Governing Council, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gobrel, FCIPM-FNLI. The Vice President, Mrs. Chidima Obiejesi, FCIPM. The National Treasurer, Mrs. 𝐍𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧𝐬, FCIPM. The immediate past President, Mr. 𝐻𝐿𝑢segun, FCIPM, FNLI. Elected council members present on this call. Distinguished fellows of the Institute present on this call. Our distinguished speakers and panelists for today's occasion. Our moderator, our MC, Chairman, Institutional Development Committee, present here with us in the council chambers as well. All members of the Institute, all non-members of the Institute, HQ staff, good morning once again. I would ask that we all please rise as we take the Institute's Code of Conduct, and you recite after me. And when you get to I, you insert your name and your membership grade if you're a member. If you're not a member of CIPM, be very careful when you get to this line. We're watching out, but we're glad to welcome you on board as a member of CIPM. Shall we all rise, please? Code of Conduct. The Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, as the apex regulatory body for human resource management practice in Nigeria, is committed to the highest possible standards of professional conduct and competency among its members. Therefore, as a member of the Institute, I pledge that I shall at all times carry out my duties and responsibilities with integrity and diligence, demonstrate competence and ethical behavior in all my business, professional, and personal activities, respect the laws of the land, promote, encourage, and emplace acceptable processes and procedures in the practice of human resource management within my sphere of influence. Endeavor to make personal decisions after considering all options, of which resignation may be one, in defense of this code of conduct, where there are conflicts between my professional obligations and the expectations of my job roles. So help me God. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Over to you, MC.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. It's always a pleasure listening to you read out the Code of Conduct. Now we would go to the welcome address by the President and Chairman of Governing Council of CIPM, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gobrel, FCIPM, FNLI. Please, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kemi. The Vice President, Mrs. Chidima Obiejesi, FCIPM, the National Treasurer, Mrs. 𝐍𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧𝐬, FCIPM, the Registrar and Chief Executive, Ms. Oluwakemi, FCIPM, the immediate past President, Mr. 𝐻𝐿usegun, FCIPM, FNLI, distinguished elected council members, governing council members, fellows of our institute, our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD, Chief Consultant B. Adedipe & Associates, our esteemed panelists, Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, NPOM, Director General Imoudu, National Institute for Labor Studies, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa-Partner, Enzo, Krypton & Co., Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, MCIPM-FITD, Permanent Secretary, Lagos State Ministry of Establishment and Training, our Moderator, Oluwakemi Shonubi, MCIPM, Director, People, Culture, Experience and Operations, TVC Communications, Chairman of the Institutional Development Committee, Mrs. Abisola Dokumu Adegbite, MCIPM, members of our great institute, attendees at the 2024 Annual Public Lecture, members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning all, and welcome to this prestigious Annual Public Lecture of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, CIPM. I'm excited to be here today as we engage in a discussion that will continue to have far-reaching consequences for public and private sector organizations across Nigeria. The topic of our discourse today is indeed very timely and very crucial. I know that it is very likely that people will think that this is just another talk shop or another lecture on wages. But trust me when I say, this is and will be no ordinary conversation. The new national minimum wage is a topic that has sparked debates, generated discussions, and yes, sometimes even heated arguments. But let's be honest, if we are not arguing about something as important as wages, then we're probably talking about something just as dramatic, like the never-ending fuel price hikes or the traffic jams that seem to be part of our daily routine in Lagos, Abuja, and some of our other cities. The new national minimum wage is a conversation that will affect not only the future of work in Nigeria, but also shape the economic and social fabric of our great nation. If you ever thought discussions about wages could be dry, I assure you that today's session will be anything but that. We will bring the heat and maybe even a little humor to spice things up. After all, they say laughter is the best benefit package. Before we dive in, let me give you a little context on why this topic is so crucial. As many of you know, in July 2024, the federal government of Nigeria approved a new national minimum wage of 70,000 naira, up from the previous 30,000 naira. This monumental increase is a significant shift in the economic landscape, and it poses important questions for both public and private organizations. But it also presents opportunities for us to find new ways to ensure that our workforce is motivated, productive, and properly compensated. Now, while this wage increase is certainly a step in the right direction, let's not deceive ourselves. With Nigeria's inflation rate sitting at a staggering 24.08% in October 2024, that 70,000 naira won't stretch as far as it used to. When you factor in the rising cost of food, where a plate of rice now seems to cost the same as a monthly subscription for Netflix, you realize that the 70,000 naira might not even cover a week's worth of market runs, let alone rent and transport. This then begs a critical question. What is the long-term impact of this new minimum wage on business operations, on economic sustainability, and of course on employee welfare? According to the National Bureau of Statistics, as of 2023, Nigeria's inflation rate was a staggering 22.24%, meaning that while 30,000 naira was the minimum wage in 2023, the purchasing power was already severely eroded. Today, with a new minimum wage of 70,000 naira, the question then remains, how will this affect cost structures, employee morale, and of course, the broader economy? At CIPM, we are always at the forefront of crucial national discourse, channeling our energy to ensure that we are not merely passive observers, but active participants in shaping the future of people management and human capital development in Nigeria. We believe that discussions like today's are not just necessary, they are essential. And we are proud to be the champions of this cause. Our role is not to simply talk about issues, but to push for practical solutions, to provide our members and the broader community with the tools and knowledge to adapt, grow, and succeed. A minimum wage increase is not just about paying workers more. It is about creating a sustainable work environment for both employees and employers alike. As we therefore delve into today's discussion, I encourage everyone, whether you are an employer, an employee, or even just a concerned citizen, to ask questions, share ideas, and engage actively. Let us turn this discourse into something more than just complaints. Let us make it about practical and actionable solutions. Together, we can ensure that the implementation of the new national minimum wage becomes a win-win situation for both employees and employers, driving sustainable economic growth for the nation. Before I conclude, let me take this moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD, the Chief Consultant of B. Adedipe and Associates, for graciously taking the time out of his very busy schedule to be with us today. Dr. Adedipe is a renowned economist with a wealth of experience in economic consultancy, and we are fortunate to have him share his insights on such a critical issue. I would also like to extend our sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, NPOM, Director General of the Imoudu National Institute for Labor Studies, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, and of course, Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, Permanent Secretary, Lagos State Ministry of Establishment and Training, who will provide invaluable perspectives and insights to ensure that this discussion is as comprehensive and productive as possible. Your contributions today will help shape a conversation that we believe will resonate beyond this room. As we move forward today, remember the words of the famous Nigerian writer, Professor Chinua Achebe, who said, "If you do not like someone's story, then write your own." Today, we are here to write our own story, one where we come together to tackle the realities of minimum wage and build a more sustainable and equitable future for Nigerian workers and businesses. So without further ado, let us embark on this journey of learning, insight, and action. I look forward to a thought-provoking and solution-oriented session. Let the discussions begin. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, my president and chairman of Governing Council of CIPM, Malam Ahmed Ladan Gobir, FCIPM FNLI, for that fantastic welcome address. I like the part where you already mentioned that we will bring the heat and maybe a little humor. Also noticed where you said where a plate of rice and the subscription of Netflix is almost the same. That's deep, very deep, sir. Thank you very much once again. If you're just joining us, welcome, and others who have been here since we kicked off, hello again, everyone. I am Oluwakemi Shonubi, and I'll be your MC host for today's activity. A few reminders, once again, before I launch into how we're starting. First and foremost, I need you all to please mute or turn off your microphones when any of the speakers are presenting their discussions to avoid unnecessary noise and distractions. Secondly, and most importantly, if you have any questions, please write them down. We have a Q&A box at the bottom. We're using Zoom, which will be addressed by the speakers. And of course, when we get to the panel session during either of the open forum sessions. Lastly, we also would like to request that participants, all of you here, will fill out evaluations later on as soon as it comes up on the screen. And on behalf of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody once again. I personally am looking forward to a lot of learning, a lot of nuggets, a lot of discussions and insights today. I hope you all have your pen, paper, for you to take something away from here, because we've lined up for you a very fruitful, engaging mix of persons and conversations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and honor to acknowledge and recognize our erudite keynote speaker, somebody very dear to me. I listened to him I think it was sometime last year when I met him in person. I know he's smiling and looking at me. We have a selfie together, so I can boast, my celebrity to claim to fame. And I'd always watched him on TV, but it's a fantastic person to listen to. And there was nobody else that could dissect this conversation the way we want it dissected. So I would first introduce him, through his profile. Quickly, I would be introducing Dr. Biodun Adedipe, PhD, FCIB, FCIOD, FERP, FIMC, FICBC. When you hear these kinds of intro, you know that it's power-packed. Dr. Adedipe is a founder and chief consultant of B. Adedipe Associates Limited, BAA Consult, with over 44 years of postgraduate work and professional experience in university teaching, investment banking, project finance, management and financial consulting, as well as leadership in business and not-for-profit organizations. Dr. Biodun has had an illustrious career that took him through the University of Lagos Enterprise Consulting Group, the World Bank Africa Region, International Merchant Bank PLC, and First City Monument Bank PLC. He tells plenty stories from FCMB. I know many of those stories. He received his doctorate degree in industrial economics, specializing in corporate finance, from the University of Lagos in 1989, and BSc in economics first class. From the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, OAU. Before they start singing Great Ife, in 1980, and bagged several awards in the process, including Sir Adam Thompson Scholarship as visiting doctoral student in the University of Sussex, UK, 1984. I'm almost done. It's power-packed. He's a member of several respected professional bodies and membership organizations, including the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, fellow and council member. Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria is also a fellow. The Nigeria Economic Society is a life member. American Economic Association and Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry Council member. Dr. Biodun founded BAA Consult in February 1993, and he was responsible for charting and managing the firm's strategy and activities since operations commenced in March 1994. He retired into an advisory role in the firm with effect from June 2024. He sits on the boards of a corporate profit-seeking and for a couple of profit-seeking and not-for-profit organizations in diverse capacities as chairman, non-executive director, and independent director. Now, we have virtual claps, so let them see your virtual claps as we welcome Dr. Biodun Adedipe, who will be steering us through the theme and setting the tone of today's event. So please, virtual claps for him. Virtual. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Shonubi. And for those side comments as well, I very much appreciate them. And it's my pleasure and I'm happy to be here this morning. And I express my gratitude and appreciation to the President and Chairman of Council, Malam Ahmed Gubri, and the Council members, as well as my very good friend and brother, the immediate past President, Mr. 𝐍𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧𝐬, the leadership of CIPM, the members, and the distinguished guests that are present here this morning. So thank you so very much for having me here. I prepared a deck of slides, not so many of them, but I believe that everyone will get a copy of that. So I will share the slides and then speak to the issue. Like our dear President said earlier on, he has put context into our conversation today. So I will just bring my own perspective in terms of a few areas to look at that I believe will excite the conversation and make it really, really interesting. So I will share my slides now and then turn up my video so that people can pay more attention to the slides. Now, the subject, we all know that already, the new minimum wage, implications for public and private organizations. So I will run through this outline, do a quick background, and then talk about conceptual issues. We can't escape that, especially when you bring an academic into the conversation. So, but I won't dwell so much on that so that people don't get, put off by too hard stuff, so to say. They make it very simple. Then I give 2 slides on the arguments for new minimum wage and, of course, against minimum wage. Then what are the policy design issues? There are 5 of them that each time we talk about this, they must be put in context. Then my final slide is just one, talking about the inferences. What are those things that should guide us each time we are discussing and trying to reset the minimum wage? So I will start this way. First, the context of the Nigerian economy. I picked this up from 2 of my friends that we are on the same platform. They are professors of economics. And they said there's a simple way we can describe the Nigerian economy. It is management challenge. It is post-colonial. It is import dependent. It is structurally incoherent. It is extraction focused. It is monoproduct dependent, political economy. And I found this very apt. So this sets in context, therefore, the kind of challenges that we see in the operating environment. A couple of times in the past and up to date, I've been invited to some, professional bodies, sectors, and of course, some, let me say, platforms to help set context when there is a need for, negotiation of wages across different industries and sectors. And I always remind them that whatever I want to do must be set in context of the environment where we operate. This now is my standard summary of the challenges in the Nigerian economy. But I also always remind people that as much as possible, don't get carried away analyzing and discussing problems and challenges. Otherwise, your energy will get drained. But when you look at the challenges, is to acknowledge them, that they are real and they exist. But focus more is on how to respond to them and then design the way forward. We know there are macroeconomic concerns in our economy, high interest rates, monetary policy rate now 27.5%, exchange rate happily in the last 1 week thereabout. We've seen the Naira appreciate in value because of a new system introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and of course the parallel market responding to that, making speculators in the FX market in Nigeria jittery. So a lot of them offloading the dollars and probably a few other currencies that they carry. Inflation rate is still very high up. Our president mentioned that in his opening remarks at 33.88% as at October this year. And of course, food inflation much higher than that at 39.16%. That is quite significant. Of course, we have unemployment rate, which happily has been redefined in the way to be computed by the International Labour Organization. And so you see that, yes, from the lofty 30-something% we're talking about before, It has now come down to 4%. The interesting thing here is that about 84% thereabout of those that are in employment in Nigeria are self-employed. So which means the terrain has shifted. And of course, the issue of poverty, which is a factor in minimum wage. Insecurity is a major challenge. Consumer behaviors changing. Of course, employee restlessness, technology disruptions, liquidity. Which means at the end of the day, when you look on the side of the employers of labor, liquidity will matter. But it's a function now of affordability and capacity to pay. But we see how all of these issues balance as we go on. Now, still on the basic issues, and I want us to put in context the minimum wage itself, have a common understanding. The minimum wage is a price floor that is set in the labor market, which means every employer of labor, because it is legal, it is a law, it means legally, the employer of laborers are not allowed to pay anything below the minimum wage. So it's a floor. That's the first understanding. Secondly, it is actually designed to help households, that is suppliers of labor, to earn a living wage. That is talking about the actual, understanding of that. Typically, minimum wage also applies to low-wage jobs that have three peculiarities. First is they are low in terms of educational requirements. Secondly, they are low in terms of the skills. And of course, in terms of experience. Now, if you look at what this means, what it tells you in this third bullet point is that it usually apply to mostly the youth. Number one, they lack experience. They are yet to acquire the skill that can distinguish them in the labor market. And of course, a number of them possibly don't have the requisite educational qualifications. So now I move on to the meaning. What now does this mean? First is that if it is set nationally, it means every public and private entity is expected to comply. Now, the key word here is expected, but they don't always all comply anyway. I will talk about that when I'm closing my presentation, what that causes between those that comply and those that do not. Now, secondly, it has been argued that minimum wage is a very useful tool for assuring social justice. So in which case, you are looking at those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. So how do we ensure they get value that is, number one, commensurate to what they are contributing, but number two, also ensuring that there's a balance. I was reading something just before this lecture began, and a friend of mine posted on a platform I'm part of and said that there was a lady that came on and put on an issue that there's a neighbor of hers who has 6 children, and that woman obviously is struggling and needs help. But in her own case, she and the husband adopted family planning. So they have only 2 kids, and therefore they are able to take proper care of the kids. So her own question is, should she go out and assist this woman with 6 children who is struggling, even though there's a thinking in her own mind that the woman is in that position because herself and the husband did not embrace family planning? Then, of course, somebody now commented and said, hey, wait a minute. When it comes to this matter, it's not about you not being the cause of the woman's problem. It is about ensuring you also stretch a hand of fellowship to the woman so that you can live in a peaceable environment. So this is talking about social justice, all right, which means you may find yourself suffering a problem that you did not cause. But if minimum wage will be effective, and this is my own argument that you find it also, in labor economics, then it must be set above the equilibrium wage that is determined by the labor market. That is now coming here as an economist. The interplay of demand and supply in every market, but in this context, it is the labor market. So, but theoretically and very rare in practice, it can be set below the equilibrium wage level, which means the minimum wage can be below the equilibrium wage level, the wage level where demand and supply are equal in the market. And we say, yes, that is possible theoretically, but it's also very rare in practice. Just like when we talk about interest rate, and we talk about negative interest rates, which the world did not know in reality, that is in practice, until post-COVID-19. Prior to then, it was something in the realm of theory. They now became a reality as central and reserve banks all around the world started now, embracing that tool. Let's now come to the issue of this minimum wage as it has happened historically and also globally. And I picked this up from a publication, and that is titled Minimum Wage, Global Challenges and Perspectives. What is happening across different jurisdictions? And it is in the publication by the National Policy Center for Inclusive Growth, an article written by Bessa and Zhu. They said, after being widely cast as a counterproductive job killer and an unwelcome source of labor market rigidity in the 1980s and early 1990s, statutory wage floors have made a return to the forefront of social policy debate. And why is that so? Number one, there are two reasons here. More recent interest in the adoption of national or regional minimum wage, especially in the last 20 years thereabouts, has been reduced to two factors. Number one, there is growing evidence from research, that's in the academia, and also national minimum wage institutions, that shows that minimum wages have not generally resulted in the type of massive job destruction feared by some of its most outspoken critics, which means one of the things we normally will argue, I will show you about 5 charts now. One talks about a normal situation in the labor market and then looks at what happens when minimum wage is increased. What is that likely to cause? That will relate to the argument that it will cause job losses and therefore result in exacerbating unemployment. The other side is, it says, if the market, the labor market, is inelastic, what will be the implication of an increase in minimum wage? If the labor market is inelastic, what will it look like? I will show you some charts, after this particular slide. Now, the second issue observed in the last 20 years thereabout is the failure of past reforms in many countries to deliver inclusive growth. And then we make reference to our own country, Nigeria. Now, our economy grew very strongly between 2001 and 2013, averaging GDP growth rate of about 6.2%, very strong. But then a study came out in January 2014, and that study said, based on evidence available, it is clear that not all the countries whose economy were growing strongly were actually growing in an inclusive manner. So in that study, 4 countries were identified as carrying, or let me say, demonstrating that aberration. An aberration of the type that the economies were growing, but they were not creating jobs. But instead of creating jobs, those economies were creating dollar millionaires. And then 4 of them were identified. And an acronym was coined from the first letters of their names. And they were called MINT, where MINT represents these countries grow, interestingly, but they are minting dollar millionaires rather than minting jobs. And they were identified as Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. So they were branded as the mint countries: Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. So in which case, our country is among the top 4 that show this peculiarity of factor number 2 here. That have been growing. We've done all manner of reforms up until that time, but we were creating dollar millionaires instead of creating jobs. So now, coming to what our president made reference to earlier on, the new minimum wage approved in July 2024, which was an amendment to the National Minimum Wage Act of 2019, referred to as the Principal Act. And then there were 2 new sections inserted, and that was what came out as the new minimum wage. Number 1, it is stated there in black and white. Every employer, and this is why I like the way the Institute coined the topic of conversation today, and that is both public and private organizations. Now, this says every employer shall pay a national minimum wage of not less than 70,000 naira per month to every worker under its establishment, except otherwise provided under this act. Secondly, it says the national minimum wage expires after 3 years, and it shall be reviewed in line with the provisions of this act. Now, the second is also an interesting development that changed the duration of any national minimum wage that we set in Nigeria, which means it will no longer be for 5 years before we come back to the table and have a discussion of where to put the new minimum wage, but rather it will now be over a shorter period of time. Advisedly so, when you look at the dynamics of our economy and indeed even the world in which we operate today. Now, let me put some conceptual issues for those who will be interested, in this. This is the normal, labor market, where there's the demand for labor and then there's the supply of labor. You know what we call economics 101. The intersection of demand and supply is where the market is clear. That means the number of people looking for jobs actively and number of job openings that are available come exactly equal. So nobody is out there in the market who actually wants to work and doesn't find a job. But at that point, we call it the equilibrium point. So you have the equilibrium quantity, QE, and then you have the equilibrium wage, which is WE. Now, that's a normal market. The market has cleared. But when you now introduce minimum wage and you set it above the equilibrium wage, you have something like the red line I put here, MW representing minimum wage, then WC represents the wage set under the national minimum wage law. All right. Now, the interpretation of this now follows. In the normal labor market we are looking at, that is where interactions of demand and supply set what happens in that market. This is the interpretation of the new minimum wage above the market price clearing, equilibrium wage. You find that the portion that is colored yellow here represents unemployment that can likely happen when the minimum wage is set above the market clearing wage rate, in which case the demand for labor will reduce. Of course, supply will increase. That's what you see here. This is the point where supply increases to. More people are now willing to work because what is offered as minimum wage is attractive, all right? But employers, we want to employ fewer people. And so as they cut back, because of the new minimum wage, the gap between these two will now create a section that represents unemployment. But the argument doesn't stop there. It now says, if unemployment is triggered by the increase in the minimum wage, there will also be welfare laws. Welfare laws that I painted blue here in this particular chart, which means more people now lose their jobs. And of course, naturally, that will affect the welfare of labor in that common sense. But now, if the labor market is inelastic, that means instead of the demand and supply, let me call it curves anyway, although there are straight lines in this illustration to make it simple, you find that it is narrower, which means if the labor market is inelastic, then the pushback on the demand side by employers will not be as wide as it was in the normal market. All right. In the same way, the number of people that will respond to the increase in minimum wage will not be that high. In which case, you are looking at a situation where more people, like I mentioned earlier, of using data in Nigeria, will go the way of self-employment. All right. Because they don't see the window of unemployment being closed by current employers that demand for labor. Then the corollary to that is where the labor market is elastic. See how spread wide, the curves are. In which case, if the labor market is elastic, that means the demand and supply of labor, demand for labor, When they become elastic, it means the curves will spread wider. And so the impact of an increase in minimum wage will be much more in terms of unemployment. Let's now come to the arguments for and against. Very interesting. And this is where we now begin to see the implications for public organizations and private organizations. And this is how the argument goes. Number one, there's a general consensus that an increase in minimum wage will alleviate poverty. And as our president said earlier in his opening remarks, yes, minimum wage raised from 30,000 to 70,000 July this year. Now, ordinarily, and that is I'm speaking as an economist now, all things being equal, ceteris paribus, an increase from 30 to 70% is about 133% increase. Okay, and that is quite huge. 133% increase in minimum wage. So by all means, that is supposed to bring some workers that are deep in the poverty, that is deep below the poverty line, to close to the poverty line or possibly above it, depending on how things play out. But it doesn't always stay there because the environment where we operate is dynamic. So there's therefore what we call the static analysis. There's also dynamic equilibrium. And of course, I won't take you into all of those details. That's for economists to, have their own headache in discussing and figuring out. But ordinarily, if you increase my pay, that should make me better off in terms of welfare. In fact, you have increased my real income, assuming, that's what I said earlier, the inflation rate doesn't change. But in our environment, inflation rates has ticked up. But not only that, food inflation is a major factor, which has been even above the headline inflation in Nigeria. Secondly, if minimum wage is well structured, it should reduce the wage differentials between the highest paid workers and the least paid, which means it's not just moving pay up across the entire ladder at the same rate, which means if it is properly structured and defined, it should make the lowest paid have an improvement in their pay, and then the highest paid not at the same rate. That is what this portends. Now, also, increasing new minimum wage can be an incentive for those who have been indifferent to searching for work to begin to look for work, because they see that there's an improvement in their welfare, especially in jurisdictions where they have social welfare schemes. And then when pay increases, the incentive to work increases as well. So instead of collecting dole, as they call it, for example, in the US, or collecting social welfare in some other jurisdictions, they see that I will be better off if I work because what I will get is significantly greater than the welfare I collect. Number 4 relates now to the public sector. And it says it will in turn enhance government revenue. How does that work? Now, the more people that work, number one, the more those people earn, the higher, of course, will be the taxes they have to pay. So through this particular tax element, payee, okay, government revenue also gets to increase when minimum wage is raised. Then the sixth argument in support of it. Yes, fifth one is that it reduces the need for social intervention. This is my own argument, all right? That if minimum wage increases, that should reduce the need for social intervention schemes by various governments, whether federal or subnational, state and local government. The need for them to intervene should also reduce if the process is well managed and it is handled also holistically. I will come to that argument shortly before I wrap up. Now, it also will boost employee morale. I mean, we all know this from experience. Now, respective organizations are very sure. At least for me, being an employee of labor now for over 30 years, I know what it has been like each time we increase pay in BA Consult. Or like now a promise that we have adopt a new pay structure from January 2025. Everybody in the company is excited, looking forward to more money in the pocket. So typically it boosts employee morale. And if that is done, it also inadvertently enhances employee productivity. That now are the argument in support of it. But ultimately, it also helps staff retention. Now, it doesn't guarantee staff retention. That's why I use the word help. It helps staff retention. But there's also something we say when it comes to employee remuneration. And we at times advise this to some of our clients. We practice it in BA Consult. It is possible to price an employee out of the market. That means in your organization, there are some cadre of staff that what you pay them, they hardly can get short pay elsewhere. So when your organization does that deliberately as part of your strategy for staff retention, they will say that what you have done is you have priced that particular employee or group or set of workers out of the market. So it helps staff retention. And I can give an example here. In BA Consult, we have staff that have done 26 years out of our 30 plus years in operation. We have another one who has done 20 years, another has done 24 years. And so when you look at all this, of course, if you look at their level, that's a level where we deliberately, as a matter of strategy, price those people out of the market. In which case, with their credentials, experience, skills, and all, they hardly can get similar jobs elsewhere, paying them the same amount. So again, this varies across organizations. Then there are also arguments against minimum wage, and very interesting because there are many. The first one says that minimum wage will result in an increase in classical or real wage unemployment that typically puts youth at a disadvantage. Because when you increase pay, it means in order for employers of labor to get value out of what they are paying out as their wage bill, they want to become more selective about those they put on their payroll. And when it comes to that, it means there'll be heightened competition for available jobs. And when that happens, typically it is the youth that lack experience, that lack requisite skills that you normally acquire on the job, that also probably are educationally disadvantaged, that at the end of the day fall out and they become part of what they call classical unemployment. Then secondly, is that when you increase minimum wage, it often triggers demand for higher wages by those earning above minimum wage pre-adjustment. I will give again an illustration. Last month, November 2024, this happened with one of our clients, and this was what went on. A particular cadre of employees, and that is drivers. Now, the pay of drivers were more or less restructured in response to this minimum wage on the one hand, and then the cost of living on the other hand. And so we found that most companies that outsource drivers now came with new rates for drivers. In order to retain that, in fact, this particular entity lost a driver in response to that because he got a job from another entity, from that outsourcing company. So in order to match that, this particular firm now said, hey, you know what? Our own second driver that drives our CEO, please move his pay from, I think, around the 80-something thousand to almost 180,000 in order to match what the market is saying so that we don't lose the driver. If we lose him anyway to replace, that is the kind of wage we'll be paying per month. And so when that happened, this firm said that for every employee in their own organization, they will need to now go and review wages. In which case, those who were earning close to the minimum wage before, that now moved because of what the market for their kind of skills is defining, now circled back to increase the wages of those who were above the minimum wage. True life story. Okay. Number 3, argument against minimum wage is that anytime you do that, it always triggers new inflationary pressures. And of course, we can see the evidence in Nigeria, circling back to the early 1970s with the Doji Awards and so many others over the years. Each time we increased minimum wage in Nigeria, there was always an uptick in the rate of inflation. And then there's the argument that increasing minimum wage can result in business closures and job losses, in which case wage bill increases, and if revenue doesn't increase commensurately, it might result in bankruptcy business collapse. And of course, for some, they may not close down, but they retrench staff, not retrench business lines now. They retrench staff. And so job losses can also result. There's equally the argument that this is mostly in, the advanced economies, especially in Europe. This is very common in Europe, where business relocate to jurisdictions where labor is cheaper. And of course, you see that also happening to us in Nigeria from places like China, India, and some Far East countries. Even some Eastern European countries are doing the same now, coming to set up factories in Nigeria because labor is cheaper here. Because people often wonder when I tell them that there's new manufacturing evolving in Nigeria. And they ask me, which manufacturing? I say, well, it's not just about the data from MBS that shows clearly that manufacturing is part of the top 7 contributing sectors to our GDP. But when you peel your eyes and observe what is happening, especially when you go into some corridors, you see that there's new manufacturing happening here in Nigeria. But not only that, check out the nationalities of the promoters of those businesses. Then go back and check their own jurisdiction back home. What is the wage rate there? And what is the wage rate here in Nigeria? By the time you throw the exchange rate in between, labor becomes relatively cheap in Nigeria here. Equally, some argue that why set a national minimum wage when there are differences in the cost of living in regions within that economy? That argument has been used in China. So China now, when it sets its minimum wage, doesn't set only a national one. They also look at regional minimum wage. You can also bring that home here, of course, in a number of other countries. But let me just use UK, for example. In UK, there's an argument for a differential between minimum wage applicable in South as different than the one in the North of UK. Let's come back home, and I will make just simple reference. The highest rate of inflation, later data for October this year, was in Sokoto State, where the year-on-year increase in food inflation was 52.18%, followed by Edo and Borno. Year-on-year inflation rate, lowest in Kwara, then followed by Kogi and Rivers. So when you look at inflation rate also, it is diverse throughout Nigeria. So the question then is that if the cost of living in different states and geopolitical zones of Nigeria are that different, should it be the same minimum wage applicable all through the states and, of course, the geopolitical zones? Then the last argument again says governments often lead in low-wage employment. And so naturally, it is government wage bill that will increase. I mean, I recall a conversation before the agreement of minimum wage of 70,000 in July. I was invited to Arise Television to give a public enlightenment on the whole issue so that we can get labor to return to the negotiation table with government representatives. Because at that time, negotiations had broken down. And I said, okay, let's play the numbers. And the numbers I played were very simple. Let's look at the employees of governments in Nigeria, federal, state, and local government. Came up with the number. I said, okay, now, let me play this number against labor's demand, all right? What will that mean in terms of the wage bill for the government? Put that on one side. And now, go also to the data on our GDP, which gives all the size of the economy. Now, take all the budgets of the states, the federal and local governments combined all together and make an assumption that all of them can fund their budgets 100%. Whether they borrowed or not, they funded the budget 100%. Let's assume that that is the value government creates. Compare that with our GDP, you will get around 10%, which means the most value, or let me say higher value, is being created in the private sector than in the public sector. The big issue about public sector is that it sets policies. But if you talk about spending, if you aggregate all the spending, it's just about 10% of our GDP. All right? If that is the case, that means in terms of jobs as well, The private sector creates a lot more jobs than the public sector. So if that is the case, let's now use that ratio to weigh the wage bill possibly for the private sector. By the time I put everything together, estimate for public sector and estimate for private sector, it came to 97% of our GDP. So it didn't make any sense, arithmetic-wise, for us to go at that level, in which case we needed to come down to a level that is realistic. So all I said then was that, look, Labour needs to please go back to the negotiation table and take a second look at what they were demanding for. And then the anchors now said, okay, what should government do? I said, we're very simple. Government should also move a little bit. So what are the 5 policy issues when it comes to minimum wage? And this is what I will say and wrap up within the time allotted for my, lecture here. There are 5 issues, and I agree with Bessa and Zoo. That's why I adopted what they have summarized. First question is, who should set the minimum wage? Now, good practice, looking throughout the world, how minimum wage is handled. Across South America, North America, you go to Europe, go to, Far East, Middle East, all around the world. How is it done? Good practice indicates that governments should set minimum wages after a genuine process of consultation and social dialogue with representatives of workers and employers, listening to their arguments, and as much as possible, taking stock of their concerns. That's the first thing. In which case, leadership is done by the government, but the process, consultation is wide, and there'll be social dialogue. Secondly, the second question, who should have a right to the minimum wage? Now, for minimum wage laws to protect the most vulnerable workers, I call them those that are at the bottom of the pyramid. And as much as possible, they should not inadvertently exclude groups such as domestic workers, casual workers, piece rate workers, or home-based workers. In which case, in all the conversations, consultation, dialogue, we should not forget these vulnerable, the most vulnerable workers that should be taken into account in, setting the minimum wage. The third question, how many rates should there be? I mentioned in passing earlier on what happens in some, I mentioned China and UK, for example. Now, in some countries like Nigeria, we have a single national rate. And in some other, they are differentiated by unique regional rates. Now, this is usually the case in large and or decentralized countries. Brazil, for example, has a federal rate and some higher rates in a few richer states. And that is what we have seen, for example, in Nigeria this year, with the new minimum wage set at 70,000. We see some states like Lagos, like Rivers, that have set their minimum wage above this national recommended, the National Minimum Wage Act. All right. The other thing is, at what level should the minimum wage be set, and how often should it be adjusted? Now, when you look around the world, there's no standard formula on this. But as I said earlier on, in our own case, we have said 2 elements. What is the minimum wage and what is the period of reset? So we have adopted that in Nigeria, so as a way to deal with it. So, and happily also, as I said, what we said July this year will not last for 5 years as we had done previously. It will last for 3 years, and then we take another look at it and reset. The last question is, how do we maximize compliance? That's the one I referred to earlier, and I said I'll make a comment on it later. High rates of non-compliance, where they exist, have negative consequences, not only for workers and their families, whose rights are now violated, because once it is set in the law, by right, every worker is entitled to that, but also for compliant employers, because it gives non-compliant enterprises an illegitimate cost advantage. We are two in the same business. One complies, one does not comply. Obviously, the one that complies, we have a bigger payroll, all right? If that's the case, it means I'm at a disadvantage. not because I'm not running my business well, but simply because I comply with the law, and there's another enterprise that doesn't comply, which case I'm already at a competitive disadvantage because of my compliance. So that is why we also raise this issue when it comes to, the implication of non-compliance. So my end notes, and it is on the general argument I've made each time I'm involved in discussing the minimum wage. That if the minimum wage will be fair to all the stakeholders and also sustainable, then number one, the process must be transparent, the process must be realistic, and there must also be flexibility. Okay, that's the alarm I set for my son to wrap up. So I know I have 3 minutes to go. So there are 5 considerations I normally put here. Number one is cost of living. That will reflect the basic needs of workers. Basic needs is not the same as needs. All right. So the cost of living consideration in minimum wage discussion reflects the basic needs of workers. All right. In those days, in the 60s, in the 50s, before independence, even the early years of post-independence, we used to talk about employee emolument. And I remember growing up that the joke we used to have around that is your emolument is supposed to take care of you and your immediate family. In which case, it will meet your basic needs and ensure that you keep coming back to work, because that is your sustenance. But the second argument is productivity, in which case ensuring fair compensation for work done. Which means now we also evaluate jobs. We look at job content. We look at the value every job is delivered. So there's now a correlation between the pay and the productivity. Which is why most organizations today, when we talk about strategy, people strategy, we talk about employee contribution. In which case, what are you contributing? Assuming you are in a center that generates income within that organization, they will label it as a profit center. In which case, you are looking at the income you generate. This is what you are costing the company, so you produce profit. But if someone is in the cost center, that means the department of vertical that person belongs to is not generating income, is only cost. But we also look at you as contributing to profit, because you are ensuring that every naira spent by your organization, your employer, is creating value in terms of the business. Number 3, which is one of my strong arguments, is that whichever way it goes, minimum wage must also consider affordability and the ability to pay. One of the things we say in my firm, for example, is when we started out, most of our clients were banks, but now we consult across all the sectors. Now, in those early years, I will always remind my colleagues, if you want to earn the salary they pay in banks, you are in the wrong place. Go look for a job in a bank, because I'm not running a bank, but a consultancy. So I will pay you what the company can afford. So you are please free to go if you want to. That is when pressure is coming to increase pay. We can only pay what we have. We can give only what we have and pay what you can afford. And now, of course, the 4th factor is sustainability. In which case, there's one about affordability. There's also the future to look at. What we agree to pay now, is it sustainable in the long term? How long can we keep paying this and remain keeping you in employment and meeting the needs of every stakeholder of this entity? The final point is fairness. Fairness is on an ongoing basis. Gradually, you are bridging the gap between the least paid and the highest paid each time you do that. So that means all of these factors are considered each time we are discussing and setting the minimum wage. So that said, I want to say a very big thank you to our dear President and Chairman of Council, the Council members, the distinguished, leadership of CIPM, and our guests here. Thank you very much for having me address this August gathering. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. Somebody just said you never disappoint, and that echoes the exact expressions and my own feedback as I was listening to you. You can't have an economist in the room and they don't use words like unemployment rate, equilibrium, demand and supply. When you start hearing demand and supply, it reminded me of when I did economics back in school. GDP, ceteris paribus. I was writing, if I open my book, but I think I also took a couple of questions down. And one of the things that was even amazing, I heard you say, when you're talking about inflation rate is a bit diverse across Nigeria, where you have highest inflation rate in Sokoto being 52.18%. And it's different in Edo, and I think I picked on in Rivers. That's very, 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 very important to note. We already have a lot of questions. I'm already trying to see how I'm going to juggle my questions. But I kept on writing, there was something else that I picked up. I didn't even know that, where the new national, wage bill or our, minimum wage it expires after 3 years. I didn't know that, and it can be reviewed. So this is one of the reasons we have you here, sir, to elucidate further, to break it down, and it goes back to what the president said, that we will bring the heat. This is not just a conversation about wages, because I know when most people saw this topic, they're just going to come and talk about money. What does it do? How we help, as we usually say. So the first question for you, sir, and I'm sure you're ready for your questions now. People have been dropping in the Q&A box. I will try and sieve through. Some are slightly repetitive, but I will try and see how best I can take a few. The first one, and this is interesting to me, he says, does the minimum wage apply to house helps? A lot of people, when we heard this 70,000, they already say, ha. I don't want to say how much some people were paying their house helps or assistants. But the question is, does the minimum wage apply to house helps? Before you take that question, sir, I would like to tell the audience that we're also streaming live on YouTube, so more people can join. If somebody's sitting beside you and can't join, just let them know that they can stream, we're streaming live on YouTube. So I don't know, do you want to write a few of the questions down? Let me just quickly maybe take 2 or 3 first, then you answer,
yes,
and I curate.
Okay,
fantastic. Now, this was a bit, you have plenty professors and theory writing people here. So one says, if a company increases its minimum wage to tally with the national minimum wage, which definitely tightens the gap between those previously below minimum wage and those above minimum wage, is the company under law to also adjust the salaries of those previously above minimum wage to maintain the initial gap between the two sets of employees before the new minimum wage? I told you that this person is a professor. I know from this question, I hope you got it, sir.
Yes.
When you were tallying the national minimum wage, the gap that previously before the minimum wage was announced and the, above, is the company under law to adjust the salaries? Let me look for another one for you, sir. This one says, well, I think you may have answered some of this, but let me just say it out. Over the years, it would seem certain national minimum wages have been counterproductive. It is argued that it is a value that should be optimized instead of wages. What do you think are the practical ways to achieve this? The question wasn't complete, but I think that's where it breaks up to. So let's take those 3, sir, if you will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so very much. Now, the first question says, does the minimum wage apply to house helps? Now, my response to that will go this way. There is a difference between formal organizations that are structured and then informal organizations. That's one. And then within that context, we now look at jobs as well. What a house help does is informal, all right? Especially when the house help did not come through, let's say, an outsourced, service provider, okay? And that relates to the example I gave earlier on. Now, if I employed my driver personally, I may not have to worry about minimum wage when it is reset. It will also simply be a mutual agreement between us in terms of what I offer and what the fellow finds acceptable, and then we run with that. But where the driver is outsourced, then the process of employment of that driver has become formal. In which case, the outsourced company is now subject to the minimum wage, and therefore the pay of that driver will equally be subject to the minimum wage law. In the same way, the outsourced company also provides cleaners. You know, I'm using jobs that ordinarily within the labor context are said to be low value.
Yes.
Which is the way I situate house help. Okay. So it's now a matter of how that particular job was contracted. Is it formal or informal? So that is what we apply in this particular instance. So, and the example I gave actually while I was speaking was my company. The driver case I gave was my company. Okay. So, and that's the way I will deal with that. The second question also, I mean, the three questions are very interesting. It says, if a company increases minimum wage to the new level set, is it under law to increase those that are already above the minimum wage? What we call consequential adjustment. Okay. Now, the law doesn't compel it to do that. But for an effective people management strategy, and of course, it's dealing with the psyche of the employee, that is why it makes sense to do consequential adjustment, which is also the reason why when you make such adjustment, the percentage increase usually is lower the higher you go from the minimum wage. That's the pattern we are seeing in the practice across different sectors where we consult. But the law doesn't require that company to do that. It's not required by law. Okay? Then the third one is the argument that minimum wage can be counterproductive. And of course, that falls under the second set of argument that I made reference to. That is the arguments against minimum wage. So, and of course, is also a major discourse in minimum wage theory and practice all over the world, not just here. And the argument is that when countries and governments embark on reforms, the ultimate end of reform is supposed to be to lift people from below the poverty line to above the line. I had an engagement on a platform with Indian company CEOs, many of them in Nigeria, over the weekend. And interestingly, this issue I made reference to using their own data, Indian data, to show them how many Indians we have brought from below the poverty line to above the poverty line in the last 30 years. Because oftentimes you talk about China. And I said, okay, look, how did that happen? And I reminded them about their own reforms. Incidentally, I was in a platform with the Chinese 2 weeks ago, similar thing I did for them, okay? And they were also excited. How can Nigeria know so much about our country? But the point here in this question is this, that if reforms are done properly, because it's not just doing reform, it's also important to sequence. So components are properly sequenced, in which case you are adding value to those at the bottom of the pyramid, not just throwing money at them. So which is why we say reforms must be holistic. If you increase my pay, and then the cost of living also rises at the same time, if I might be at, I may be worse off, in fact, than before the increase in the minimum wage. So it's one of the arguments against minimum wage increase. But again, it speaks to an important thing we must put in the discourse, and that is the thing must be holistic. It's not just about the number, it's about the value that figure puts on the table.
That's on the table, yes. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Biodun. I'm sure the questions are still dropping and I'm trying to be mindful of time. What I'm going to do is I'll select, I do apologize to the audience. I know you have a lot. We'll see if we can push some to the panel session, once we're doing that. A few also are repetition. Somebody was asking about 40, I'm paying my house help 40,000. I saw one that made me smile and I'll go there. So first question, I'll give you another, let's do 3 or 4, sir, quickly. The The first one says, can you say that the Nigerian government did a thorough job before pegging the minimum wage at 70,000? That's one. Second question is, what are the minimum number of employees that an organization should have before they can pay the minimum wage? I think you've already answered that somewhat about different, well, formal organizations, informal, and some other things. So maybe you just gloss through that. Somebody, I don't need that question. Let me go straight to this one. Yes, I think I saw one about remote workers and, you know, paying remote. Are you expected to pay remote workers minimum wage above, or, you know, how does that, this also made me smile. If my state governor announced higher minimum wage than the federal government, which one should I go with? Should I follow state government or 34,000 or 70,000? I don't know how you want. Me, I know the answer already, but yeah. So I think the last question, I'm just trying to, like I said, see which of the ones, you know, we've not catered to in your presentation. Okay, that's another repetition. Okay. So this one says, please, looking at your last post on what the requirement of a fair and sustainable minimum wage should be or look like, considering the expiration period of 3 years for minimum wage, can we say that minimum wage in Nigeria meets the standard expectation? You see that expectation according to whom now maybe the how many questions do you have, sir? How many have I given you? We have about 3. Okay. So let me leave it at
5.
that. Go ahead, sir. You use that, and yes, thank you.
All right.
Oh, lastly, sorry.
Okay,
I think this is important. It says, what is the punishment by Nigerian law? I like this one. To employers who paid below the national minimum wage. Most private schools who pay their teachers less than, is using an example, less than 40,000. So I'll end my questions because I think these sort of cater to the different buckets of line of thought from people. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for these questions. They are all very interesting, and I will address them in the order they were raised. The first question says, did the government do a thorough job, you know, in this new minimum wage that was set? Well, I will say yes, not because I was directly involved, but because like you and I, you know, that followed the conversation, the debates, the arguments, the consultations, and so on and so forth. We know fully well that it was a combination of 2 things. One was actual data, facts and figures, and then the other were the logic and, of course, consideration of expectations of the various stakeholders. I will subscribe to the fact that they did a thorough job, okay? And, of course, the amendment too shows clearly that, by all means, is like we, you know, made reference to it earlier on, that is an improvement, significant of 133% over what we had before. And of course, the fact that, you know, the period was reduced from 5 years to 3 years for the amendment of the act, which means that what we are looking at today will expire in 2027. For me also, that is a signal that they did a thorough job looking at the past and then the current dynamics of the economy, how rapidly things are changing. If you again take, for example, what I didn't even mention at all, the exchange value of the naira, that will tell you straight away that, look, clearly the indication here is that the story, I will put it this way, is today different than what it was early 2023, or you circle back to 2019 before COVID, now come to 2021 post-COVID, and so on and so forth. So clearly, they did a thorough job. The second one says, is there a minimum number of employees that makes you to be exempted from the minimum wage? Yes, there is. Now, the following employers, included in the employer, there are 4 categories. Establishments with less than 25 employees they are exempted from complying with the Amendment Act. I might as well mention the other 3. Establishment where workers are employed on a part-time basis and paid on commission. There were workers as seasonal employees, such as agriculture, construction, tourism, etc. The Act also provides for workers employed in vessels or aircrafts to which merchant shipping or civil aviation laws apply. Those are the 4 categories. So specific to your question, is organizations with less than 35 employees are not mandated to comply with it. Now, the question on remote worker. This one, I think, is peculiar to every employer. Now, let me give 2 instances. I think about 3 years or so ago, one of our employees in BA Consult emigrated to UK because he got a working visa, a work visa. And so we now said, Paul, that's his first name. If you get to UK because you have served very well while you were with us here in Nigeria, and the nature of your job role also makes it able for you to work remotely. So we still keep you on BA's payroll. You go to UK, you can work with us from there until you get a job. So that was what we did for the young man. So until he got a job, he was working with us remotely. Of course, we kept him on the same pay because this one was an offer we made, not that he even requested for it. There's one I'm dealing with now as chairman of the board of a company where the CFO just resigned because he got a work visa in UK also, and they expect him in UK in January. So we said, look, given your role, until we finish the audit we are doing now, currently with our auditors, one of the big 4, you will have to still remain a part of what we are doing here. So he gets into UK first week in January, but we work with us until end of January so that he can work with our auditors until the audit is concluded. All right, so such things happen, which means it is not provided in the law, so to say, but it's up to every individual employer. The 4th question talks about my state government offers a higher minimum wage than the federal. So which one do I comply with? Now, that is an issue in the labor market because, number 1, you are competing for competencies in the market. So if you look at the 2, let's say the wage is between 70 and let's say 85,000 in your state. So it means there's a differential of 15,000 naira. Which particular category of employees will that differential matter to? In the labor market, we say that is there a likelihood that people that earn 70,000 can abandon their jobs and go to where they find jobs of 85,000 naira. So it is the dynamics of that very market that will determine how you respond. So again, it's a strategic matter. You may still retain your staff if you stay with the federal, minimum wage of 70,000. But again, peculiarity of the business, the industry you belong to, and the peculiarities of the labor market relating to that industry will determine what to do. Now, in terms of expectations, somebody asked, there was a question on compliance. Okay, that's the last one. Well, in terms of expectations, as I said, we can use what happened in resetting this 70,000 we are at currently, the process. Labor had expectation at some point, 600,000 naira per month. And they made reference. Good argument they also made. Fantastic. Can't fault them there. Then you now come to the other side, the employers. So government said, we do this. Now, private sector employers say, if we do this because we employ a lot more people, this is what this will imply. There'll be threats to our, sustainability because ability to pay also matters. In fact, I didn't go into details of some of the charts I showed you, those graphs. Part of it also is when you begin to weigh the marginal, productivity of the employee on the one hand, and then look at the marginal, revenue and cost of the employee. When you play them against each other, the employer will say, hey, wait a minute, this increase in cost is going to imply this. In order for me to remain profitable, I may have to let go of this number. And also, so different stakeholders have different expectations. And that is why the process must work to balance those expectations. The last question is about what are the implications for employers who fail to comply?
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
In the Act, there's a provision also that failure to comply is punishable by both conviction and payment of a fine not exceeding 5% of the employer's monthly wages and of all outstanding arrears of the worker's wage. Then now goes and says, additionally, the employer will be liable to pay a penalty which is not less than the prevailing Central Bank of Nigeria lending rate on the wages owed for each month of continuing violation. So it is there in black and white. Okay? There's a fine, not exceeding 5% of your payroll. Okay? And then, of course, of all outstanding arrears. And then, additionally, the employer will be liable to pay a penalty. Think about the prevailing CBN lending rate. That means NPR. Today is at 27.5%. So in which case, you will pay that in addition to the original amount you are supposed to have paid. So, and that is just fine. Yet we still pay the outstanding. So in my own view, the provision is very clear in the Act. And that is the position of the law.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biodun. In fact, if we stay here, we'll keep listening to you. I'm seeing people ask me questions that I'm not asking all their questions as much as they want me to ask. I'm being very mindful of time because shortly after we're meant to start the panel session. But before you go, let me wrap this. I see 2 questions so that you can use this to close, and then I go to the next. One part says the law seems to be silent on consequential adjustment. Is consequential adjustment a must or subject to affordability? The second part or the next question, even though I think you sort of explained it when we're talking about penalties for organizations, was in light of the present economic situation, most organizations are struggling to survive. How should such organizations cope with paying the minimum, the new minimum wage? So one is consequential adjustment, and the other is how can we cope? You say there's no money, as they say, our necks are tight for some organizations. How do we cope with paying the minimum wage? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so very much. I think the first one on consequential adjustment, yes, the law is silent on that. But like I remarked when I was making my presentation, that is subject to every employer to decide what to do. Because the law doesn't mandate, it's not mandatory in the law that it should conduct consequential adjustment for those already earning above the minimum wage. So, and for me, that is good and fair, on employers. The second question of affordability, I think that also, yes, there's provision in the law for penalty for non-compliance, but at the same time, the issue of non-compliance is up to, let me say, the employees to raise that as a complaint. I don't know clearly where the complaint will be lodged at, but the reality also is that when you engage with, that is when the employer engages with employees, there'll be a clear understanding that if we have to pay this, we may need to let go of this number. But if we have to keep ourselves together as a family, that is where we have to be. Now we use an illustration outside of minimum wage. Okay? When the Nigerian economy went into recession in 2016, things were very tough for businesses. Okay, by 2017, we came to a roundtable conversation in 𝐏𝐻𝐿. Everybody, we came together and said, look, the way things are going, our income has contracted. And that means the capacity to sustain our current wage bill has also contracted. In which case, how do we respond? We put out the options on the flip chart board. And then we said, let's discuss. It was the employees of our firm themselves that said, look, we won't take the option of asking anyone to go. We recommend to the management, let's take a pay cut until things improve. And so all of us together agreed a pay cut in 𝐏𝐻𝐿 in 2017. Then by 2018, yes, we were able to increase, but we didn't still get to this level we were before the recession. But by the end of 2018, we returned to where we were. Then by 2019, increase in the pay. And so that is why we still remain together as a family. So people only lose their job there because of non-performance or errant behavior. So, but this is the way every individual employer, you have to design the strategy for managing your people. But as I said earlier, the central issue there is transparency. Once the management is transparent in dealing with the employees, the likelihood is very high that they will see with the leadership when it comes to times of challenges. And that's the way I will deal with this. So affordability and realism, that's the way I captured it. You want to be realistic, but you must also recognize that not all organizations can afford that, which is your weight bill related to your income is very important. And don't forget shareholders are also important stakeholders.
Yeah.
They want to run profitably
Yeah.
and be able to give them dividend as well.
Yes. Yes.
So there has to be a balance in it all. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe. This is a masterclass as expected. I wasn't expecting anything less, you know. Like I said, if we continued, we'll still be here till 4 o'clock if possible. And we totally enjoyed your session. I think one of the things I took from the last closing comment from you was transparency by management of the organization, because you need to confirm whether it's realistic and affordable. Please, let's give him virtual claps, virtual hugs, virtual trumpets, all the virtual responses right now. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. We do not expect you to go yet. I'm sure you're still around,
Yes,
and you know, because I have plenty questions still waiting, and I'm going to see if we can, you know, add you or involve you at some point. You can contribute at that point. Thank you so much. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're streaming live on our YouTube channel. It's very important that we mention that I couldn't take all the questions from everyone because we need to be mindful of time. If you're just joining, you have missed plenty learnings from the very erudite keynote speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD, who is the chief consultant for BA Consult. Now, we are going to move on to the next session, which is a bumper-packed panel session. I have a fantastic mix of persons here who I'm going to introduce shortly, and I have to be very clear and very, you know, I have to announce them with clarity, you know, and I'm sure they were all still in our learning mode. My pen is here, I have papers, books, and everything, and our eyes are peeled here, and our ears are peeled to the audio for the second part. You know, this is the part 2 bumper package. It's just for me to start whispering and making a lot of noise. We have a fantastic mix of panelists who will be joining me in this segment, and they will dive deeper into the key insights of today's theme. You know, we've been asking questions from Dr. Adedipe already, but, you know, we're going to expand the scope of those conversations. The objectives of this webinar, you know, is to, first of all, provide all of us here with the right insight and understanding into the new national minimum wage, which President Bola Tinubu, Ahmed Tinubu, signed into law on Monday, July 29th, 2024, up from initial 30,000 naira to 70,000 naira. Now, the questions you're asking will be, what are the key consequences of the 2024 adjustment to the minimum wage in Nigeria, considering the current economic climate? Somebody asked that question already. We'll delve into that further. How does this adjustment align with broader economic goals, such as poverty reduction and job creation? How does this impact both public and private organizations? We have a lot of questions, but let me start with the introductions. The first panelist. Now, you see, if you started with us at this session, he had already cleared the air on how I must introduce him. So for me to also enter the institutes of comradeship, I would start with Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, NPOM, who is the Director General, CEO Imoudu National Institute for Labor Studies. Quick detail on his profile. Comrade Issa Aremu is a distinguished Nigerian labor leader and policy expert with an extensive career in trade unionism and strategic studies. He currently serves as the Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the Imoudu National Institute for Labor Studies in Ilori. His career includes significant leadership roles in the trade union movement. He has served as the General Secretary of the National Union of Textile, Garment, and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria. He's also a member of the National Executive Council, NEC, of the Nigeria Labour Congress. He has also served as the vice president of he also is the vice president of Industrial Global Union from 2016 to 2020, representing over 50 million members across Africa, Europe, Americas, Caribbean, and Asia Pacific. I told you that this panel was going to be bumper packed, right? In addition to his labor activism, Comrade Aremu is a respected scholar and strategist. When you hear the word strategist, you know that they've dug through a lot of things, yeah? Comrade Aremu also played a pivotal role in national policy discussions, serving as a labor delegate at the 2014 National Conference and as the deputy chairman of the conference's Committee on Civil Society, Labor, Youth, and Sports. His influence and commitment to the labor movement and national development have made him a key figure in shaping Nigeria's socio-economic policies. With a legacy of dedicated service to the Nigerian working class and policy-making bodies, Comrade Aremu continues to lead efforts towards strengthening labor policies, or rather labor studies and policy frameworks in Nigeria and beyond. Please, virtual clap for the one and only Comrade Issa Aremu, who is going to induct me, I am sure, at the end of this session, into being a comrade. I'm going to be called Comrade Kemi. Yes, so my next panelist, I can see him smiling. He's already looking and saying, yeah, she's gonna, yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. I have my next panelist, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa. Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, who is a management consultant, partner, Enzo, Krypton, and Co. They have plenty things they've written on their profiles, but I'm going to try and summarize a bit. Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa is a management consultant with over 16 years experience, advising over 160 organizations across the private, public, and development sectors. His functional expertise spans strategy, corporate transformation, human capital, business process optimization, organizational redesign, public policy, internal revenue optimization. The list is long. He has also worked with several startups, enterprises, and organizations, including Bamboo Invest, Max.ai, Helium Health, Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, in case you didn't hear when I say Central Bank of Nigeria, National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, Endeavor Nigeria, and some others. He's also in his second role as a startup co-founder. He was the CEO and co-founder of Kryptr, a career development platform that leverages AI to upskill and provide ready-to-hire early career professionals for companies, cutting down recruitment and onboarding costs. This is the part that I want you to also hear. You know, we're talking economics here, right? He's facilitated online trainings for 5,000 plus professionals across Africa. But he started his career at CUC, I have a feeling I didn't pronounce it well, I apologize, consulting, receiving mentoring from senior consultants from McKinsey & Co. and Booz, now PwC. He's a graduate of economics. Emmanuel is a recipient of several awards, including recognition from Lagos State government for his contributions to education in the state. In a voluntary capacity, he serves as an advisor to programs focused on addressing Nigeria's 20 million out-of-school children problem and other nation-building initiatives. Another virtual clap and genge for our Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa. Now, I did this deliberately because she's my sister by connection. CIPM, everything PM connected. Yes, I am introducing the one and only Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, MCIPM, HRPL, PSLC, FITD, CMOID, FIMC, and recently we added this. We're there together. I was there with her. You know, when you are there, you have to recognize that people are there. She was recently inducted as a fellow. Should I break the speaker, ma? Fellow into the Institute of Leadership and Strategy and Coaching. Please, I will now read her beautiful profile. She's a permanent secretary, Lagos State Ministry of Establishments and Training. Okay, let me read it. She was born, I don't want to tell you her age because she's a very young woman. She's a very young woman. She hails from Ileshe-Ijebu and Ketu in Lagos State. Completed her early education in the UK and in Nigeria. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Linguistics from the University of Ibadan, a Master's in Business Administration from Ambrose Ali University, and a Master's in Industrial and Labor Relations from the University of Lagos. She is currently studying for her doctoral degree in Human Resource at the Lagos State University. Her career spans over a decade in advertising, manufacturing, banking, including roles at Insight Communications, Kilburn Advertising, and Eco International Bank, which is now Polaris Bank. She joined the Lagos State Public Service in March 2002 and has served in key positions across various ministries and agencies, including the Deputy Governor's Office, Ministry of Transportation, and the Lagos State Judiciary. In recognition of her leadership and performance, Olubusola became a certified ICF professional coach in 2020 and completed the executive leadership program at LASU and Cornell University, Ithaca, USA in 2022. She has received several commendations and awards, including the CIPM Public Sector Optimization Award in years 2017 and 2019. She has also served on many committees at the chapter, state and national levels in the Institute, and also given several recognition awards by past presidents of the Institute. I'm going to try and quickly move. She's the founder of Moments with Coach BA, a mentoring platform that supports professionals across all sectors. She's a chartered career mentor as well as coach majoring in life, career, and happiness spotlights. She's married to her friend of over 3 decades and blessed with children and grandchildren. You know, I didn't tell you her age. Do you hear that? So, a round of applause for my beautiful, wonderful, distinguished panel who are going to break our conversation into bits. I know we have a lot of questions. I would advise, because I saw a few people dropping their questions in the chat box. That's not where we want you to go, ladies and gentlemen. There's a Q&A box after the chat box. Please drop your questions. I'll do my best once I've asked the first line of questions now, and I would start now. Thank you, lady and gentlemen, as we start this segment. Thank you so much. So I'm starting with you, my dear Hamsek. You know, they say ladies first, so let's lead and do ladies first. We've listened to Dr. Adedipe give a fantastic keynote address. He's unbundled it. You know, I remember when this topic was brought my way, the first thing that came to my mind was try and break it down. You know, people try to shy away from economics conversations, but I'm finding that Nigerians are very they have information even more than the economists themselves. How does national minimum wage affect employment rates? That's the first question, ma'am. How does this new national minimum wage affect employment rates? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, my sister Oluwakemi Shonubi. Let me start by saying good afternoon to the President and Chairman in Council, to the leadership, my dear moderator, fellow panelists, and of course, thank you to the keynote speaker, Dr. Adedipe, that has done a lot on this. It's really interesting being at this side after so many years. Now, I would say that the relationship between minimum wage and employment rates depend on various factors. And what are these factors? These factors include level of minimum wage, the economic context, and the characteristics of the labor market. However, it can have mixed effects on employment because on one hand, it can raise workers' standards of living and helps reduce poverty. While some businesses with tight budgets may find it really difficult to hire the needed workforce. However, the relationship can be dimensional. It has different dimensional effects that could be positive or negative. On the positive aspect, as Dr. Adedipe has said a lot, number one, it could increase consumer spending. You know, the more you have funds, the more you want to buy. The more you want to change certain things. You want to change from your 12 kg gas to a 25 kg gas. You want to fill up your tank the more rather than the usual, you know, when you drive to the petrol station and say, top it up, top it up. Nobody knows if I had fuel in there. I'll just say, top it up, top it up. But this time you may say you want to really, really fill it up. It will enhance worker productivity and at the same time, reduction in turnover. That's for the positive aspect. Now, looking at the negative aspect in this relationship between the minimum wage and the employment rate, we'll have to talk about the higher labor cost. Businesses, particularly those with low profit margins, may respond to increased labor costs by reducing their workforce or cutting hours. And we know that is actually what's going on now. Most people, especially private sector or one-man businesses, have been reducing workforce from probably 10 to like 6, even some go as low as 4. Because remember, the keynote speaker talked about those principles of affordability, sustainability, and yes, affordability and sustainability. Those are the two elements, even when you're talking about negotiation or consequential adjustment. Can you sustain? Can you afford it? Now, let's talk about the negative impacts. The major one has to do with the higher labor cost. Businesses, like I said, will definitely want to cut hours or even cut costs. However, looking at the public sector, I would say that the impact the impacts might be less because governments, public sector government, they are usually proactive because they have specific budget for wage increases. In Lagos State, we call it contingency. Usually because you must be proactive, you must plan ahead. Since we know the labor laws, between 5 years and 3 years, you must ensure that you increase wages. But then most government will have these contingency funds for whatever comes up, especially minimum wage increases. And what is the goal? Why does government do this? The goal is to find a balance that ensures workers are paid living wages. That workers are paid living wages with job security. With government, you have job security. Let me stop there. Let me stop there, Kemi.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I picked, one of the first things you said, which was good in terms of the questions is, can you sustain, can you afford as organizations? And then in government, you try to find a balance where, you living wage, is it beyond the living wage? Thank you very much. At least it's a good way to start the conversation. I'm coming to you, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa. And my question is will I call it two-pronged or two branches? On one hand, I want to understand how this new minimum wage affects inflation. you know, when we're talking about, when you hear economists talk, you like to use demand, supply, inflation, you know. So how does it, you know, affect inflation? Now, the second part is organizations, companies with higher profits. Should they just stick to just paying the national minimum wage or do a bit much more? I know that Dr. Biodun has spoken generally about organizations, but part one to you is how does it affect inflation? And then companies with higher profit, how do they just stick to paying the minimum wage, or how do they play in that space? Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for having me again. You permit me to stand on existing protocol in as much as we have very distinguished guests, of course, but because of time. But I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I'd like to thank the institution for bringing us here. Very quickly, let me just help to remind people what, they know what inflation is, but how inflation, is a major indicator in the economy. And it's one of the areas that we've had to spend time helping, I'll call them the non-economists, appreciate the dynamics of it. So there are two indicators that you always need to pay attention to when you want to understand macroeconomic reports or anything now that we're entering a new year. And the first one is economic growth. Economic growth essentially is growth in GDP. And the second one is inflation. Inflation is extremely important. Now, in my opinion, most of the other ones are either, they're either derived or they either derive or drive these other two, unemployment and so on and so forth. But the idea that I wanted to point out that is very critical is Nigeria currently headline inflation is over 33%, and food is a major factor driving that. And when you now look at what a safe inflation rate should be for a developing country like Nigeria, it should be sub-8, somewhere between 4 and 8, depending on what you're looking at. So put all this together, our inflation situation is quite serious. So government was obviously under pressure to increase the minimum wage so that it reflects it, even though some employers had already started. Now, when minimum wage is increased, sectors that are heavily reliant on labor, such as manufacturing, retail, hospitality, and so on and so forth, these companies are the ones that will feel the shock. Advisory firms like ours, apart from the outsourced, low-income earners, not low-income, the outsourced support staff, I'll put it, forgive me. And you have to, there's no conversation around that. The idea is that because you're paying for very highly skilled, competencies. So for these sectors that are largely, affected, one of the things that happens is that obviously there will be an increase in cost of production, and which is very logical. They will now have to pay more, and they have a choice to pass that cost to consumers through the prices of their goods and services, or they will be forced to explore other productivity. First of all, they'll pass it most times, but the other thing is that they would have to start exploring other efficient ways to produce for less. So investment in automation. So at the end of the day, some people may eventually be asked to, leave because there's automation that will come to replace that, or there would also be pass to the consumer. The second one is, which is the good one, is that there will be an increase in demand, which is what is called demand pull inflation. What does that mean? More purchasing power in the pockets of people, and this will have a multiplier effect just down, across board, because these people cannot afford to go in there and spend more money. Even though, because we're going through inflation, we have a very high inflation rate, I beg your pardon. The implication for us is food is a very huge element, and for the poor, look at the bag of cost of rice, the cost of bag of rice, and so on. That is already putting pressure. So they may not. We're still at that phase of trying to adjust, and people still are arguing whether or not that will be sufficient because of the high cost of food. The other thing is structural and regional factors. So Nigeria has a high urban, not high, but we have a higher. I think now the urban population has taken over, and there's a lot of urban poverty. But we also are very largely informal. There's a lot of the informal sector is significant, and just like the question was asked, there are people below the organized sector who may not feel this impact. So at the end of the day, that may not mean much. On exchange rates, we're heavily import dependent. So definitely when prices of when wages are increased, people would likely also now be able to purchase more, which may put more pressure on on our currency, but that may not be the case. But let me just, so in summary, before I move to the second question very quickly, it is that it has its trade-offs, but the most important part I'd like to point is that the sectors that will be affected and how they are positioned for that. With respect to profitability of companies, is extremely subjective because the company has to they have to make strategic decisions. I'll give you two scenarios. Number one, they have to return profit to shareholders. So if you, because minimum wages are increased, you're already extremely profitable and you decide you want to go and compensate more workers. So you want to go and pay more salaries because you now have more money. You are shortchanging the shareholders, right? Or no, I mean, not shortchanging, but you're likely going to put pressure on the ability to pay dividends. But on the flip side, you now have a case where, okay, you are not, I mean, you want to actually be able to attract and pay people competitively, you know, so that they can do their work. You also want to raise employee morale. You want to distinguish yourself in the market. So for competitive reasons, you want to pay about labor requirements. But here's my conclusion. I personally think that there is a bigger conversation that needs to follow this conversation alongside, which we are going to be having, and that's the issue of productivity. You know, I was talking to one employer before this call to interview and get their perspective because they're a manufacturer, and they said that, you know what, we're increasing this thing because of cost of, not because we're getting more value for money. And once you do that, you don't get, you have to, as a business, find other ways to get more value for money. Otherwise, this rise in cost will drive up your cost and reduce your expenses and reduce your profitability. So training, upskilling, competence has become very important in being able to, so that as we increase cost, you're producing more, you're more productive to me, and you're increasing, so you're displacing the cost that, you know, that has risen from the rise in minimum wage adjustments. I hope this helps to provide context and also to advise organizations.
Yes, it does, Dr. Tarfa. Thank you so much. You know, I told people when we started that it's not only the people attending, I'm taking notes. So I'm sure you could see my pen moving. And I picked up, you know, some of the sectors that you mentioned will be heavily affected. Inflation rate is sitting at about 33%, you said. And you know, a safer space would have been between 4 to 8%. So that's a lot of pressure on the system, and I think you broke it down very nicely. So it doesn't seem like we're using, as they call it, when you're using words from your industry, it's not just jargons. It's broken down. And a bigger conversation I picked from what you said is even the issue of productivity. How do you ensure that you're getting more value? Yes, you're throwing more money in, but is it equatable to the value that you're getting in return? Are you ensuring that your workforce is productive? Are they delivering on the value that is required? Thank you so much for taking those two-pronged questions. Now, I'm going to my comrade Issa Aremu. You know, I've told you already, I'm getting comradeship after this session. He's going to induct me into the comradeship environment. So, sir, if you were listening to what Dr. Adedipe said, you know, at the beginning, he mentioned that there's some diversity around the inflation rate, even in some states, right? And it leads me to the question I want to ask you. First is, should the minimum wage vary, you know, based on geographic location, considering differences in cost of living across those regions? So when he was talking, or say Sokoto had an inflation rate of I recall it was 52%, you know, it was different in Edo and all of that. So the question now is, should the minimum wage vary based on geographic location, considering the differences in the cost of living across those regions? Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Comrade Esther.
It's Kemi, not Esther.
Comrade
You
Kemi,
have to give it to me.
Comrade Kemi Shonubi.
Yes.
Very well. You are hereby inducted. You even deserve it more now.
Thank you.
Well, yes, let me through you extend my compliments to our distinguished speaker, my very good friend, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, as well as the co-panelists. but significantly to the leadership of CIPM, because you really kept the conversation alive this year on the imperatives of the new national minimum wage. I think it featured during your last conference. And then now we're having this conversation. So it's highly commendable. And I think we can only improve on the conversation, and I would think that CIPM, we can also partner more with the other labor market institutions like Employers Association, NECA, like Nigeria Labour Congress, of course, with my institute too, beyond the fact that we're just panelists. I think we can still work as something about how to make sure that we face the challenges of the new minimum wage, especially with respect to consequential adjustment and the implementation. I'm also excited because today is the International Day for Human Rights, December 10, declared by United Nations. And as you know, labor rights are human rights, just like women's rights are human rights. And one fundamental right of labor is the right to decent work. Decent work can only take place if we have good pay, decent pay. And at the heart of the need for implementation of decent pay is the minimum wage. This is the 60th national minimum wage that Nigeria we put into law. So this is the 6th National Minimum Wage Act. The first one was 1981 under President Shehu Shagari, the former president, may so rest in peace. And the struggle for that, was led by the pioneer president of Nigeria Labour Congress, our own veteran, Alhaji Hassan Sumanu. He's still very well alive. Then in 1990, we had a slight adjustment under the military. But the third one that is very significant was when we returned to democracy in year 2000 under President Olusegun Obasanjo. And then we had the fourth one under President Goodluck Jonathan in 2010. Then the fifth one, that's under President Muhammad Buhari, that raised it from 18 to 30. And current one is the sixth one. But if you check this, and I think, Kemi, I want you to underscore the context. Out of these 6 national minimum wage laws, 5 of them took place in a democracy. I think we should not take this for granted because democracy allows for what we are doing now: freedom of expression, freedom of association for the unions, freedom to negotiate, to have compromises, I think we may have frustration with democratic process, but the alternative is worse because the military actually denied negotiation, denied right of workers. So in fact, repressed wages. And the part of the consequence we're having today of the crisis of compensation, I want to put it, at the roots during the long period of military dictatorship. I just want to put this aside. But pointedly to your question, you asked me
yeah, I asked that, yes, should the minimum wage vary based on geographic location? Yes.
Geographic location and also, I think I can say no and yes.
Okay.
But first the yes, because that's it. What is national minimum wage? National minimum wage, that's the word, national minimum wage. Okay, maybe the way I want to put it is I'm starting with the no first. That it shouldn't be geography banned. It shouldn't be location banned. It's national. Am I communicating? So it's
yes,
no, because national minimum wage. And let me define minimum wage. I appreciate very well Dr. Biodun's Adedipe, a fine economist, but I should also emphasize that labor issues are specialized issues because labor market issues are different from finance market issues or economics issues. So it's technical. Now, the minimum wage is defined as the least pay backed up by law. The least pay, the least nationally backed up, legally backed up pay for any working man or woman. The least pay backed up by law. What does it mean? It means that the backed up by law, you can't pay less than that. Any employer shouldn't pay less, but you can pay more. And it's national. It also cuts across both private and public sector. And what is the whole idea? If you don't have least pay backed up by law, some employers, whether they have the money, they have the ability to pay or not, we still want to employ slaves. You know, we still want to know people they want to pay very well. So it was a long struggle. In fact, the International Labour Organization, ILO, which is the arm of United Nations, the oldest, established in 1919. This is one of the earliest conventions that was put in place to make sure that no worker worldwide will earn less than certain pay, but backed up by law. Of course, it's about struggle for it. And that's why I've gone on memory lane. Before 1981, employer used to pay what they wanted until we had the first inaugural minimum wage law. Now, so for as long as it's national, it's not geography banned, it's not location banned. Am I communicating? It's not sectoral banned.
Yes.
Well, it has become an act of parliament signed into law by the president and become an act of, it has to be legally enforceable. And I'm happy Adedipe pointed this out. It's also sanctionable if you don't respect that law. You know, there are penalties. In fact, during the last negotiation, we're also planning to put a clause for reward for compliance. You know, because it's not just that you sanction non-compliance, it's better to reward those who pay. You know, and the whole idea is that we should not be having working poor, people who are poor on account of working, because their pay is low. You know, that they can't take care of their family, they cannot do. I know it's a lot of negotiation for 600, down we move down the line, you know, and then we settle for 70 for the current rate.
Yes.
And in real terms, in nominal terms, I agree with Biodun that very significant, 103%. But in real terms, you will be shocked that a worker in 1981 earned in real terms better than the worker in 2024. Check the exchange rate in 1981. In fact, I did some calculation. Minimum wage in 1981 at 125 naira that time. You know, with the exchange rate that time, it was about $250. So if you take a nominal rate, a worker in 1981 was earning close to about 375,000, depending on the rate you use, naira. And today, in real terms, the current minimum wage at 70, take whether 1,500 or 1,600, it does about $43. Not to talk of inflation rate of close to about 38%, close to 40%. I mean, that's official inflation rate. The unofficial is about 5%. You know, so in real terms, it's really, so you cannot debate this, that it's not a big deal. If I am CIPM, let me round up on this note. You know, I raised it with your head of human resources. You are doing very good job on this lovely, minimum wage, but we should be having conversation from minimum wage because that's a minimum. So the real decent wage, living wage, you know, the working wage. Nigeria cannot get out of this economic crisis with miserably paid working men and women. First, there won't be purchasing power. That's fine. So private sector producer of goods have nothing to sell because people will just be buying second-hand goods, you know, instead of buying second-class, first class, or what do you call it, new cloth, they buy Benda boutique, you know, Bosikoro. That's what they are buying. No textile fabric can come alive. You know, secondly, you cannot, people can meet basic needs. So it's even smart economics if you pay well. Am I communicating? It's part of the issue. You are. I think CIPM should lead the campaign for wage-led economic recovery. And I'm not even talking to restore us to 1981. You know, We have to calculate what it takes to get there now. So we shouldn't leave this struggle only to organized labor. All of us should be stakeholders in this, because what workers earn is what we use to buy goods and services, to pay rent, which those who are in public and private enterprises will benefit from. Then the second one is that it's legal. So it's illegal if anybody pays less than that. It's also about rule of law. So if I start from that premises, the inflation rate is nationwide. You agree with me very well. Cost of living is wide. So why should minimum wage should be geography band? So minimum should be. But however, if you take my definition that the least below which you won't pay, but you can also pay more.
More.
To that extent, yes. Okay. So I want to commend Lagos State government. I'm talking about, for raising the minimum wage more than that, because it's about ability to pay. It's also specific cost of living, maybe different from Ilorin. Even here, our governor also raised the rate.
Yes.
More than that. Other states have done similar things. So you can, on the one hand, national minimum, nobody should earn less than that. In any case, pay of governors are the same. Whether you are from the richest state, or you are from the poorest state of Kwara, and the same thing.
Exactly.
They have number of the same cars. There are minimum comfort for them. So there should be minimum pay for working men and women. So to that extent, it's significant. But I just want to wrap up to say, we need to raise the debate more. Am I communicating? Then the circle of national minimum wage, used to be 5 years. This new law has reduced it to 3 years.
To 3 years, yes.
Yeah, that's it. But if you ask me, Comrade Kemi Shonubi, that's the only way you deserve your comradeship. We should now even move from what UK has done. UK met us in this business. Thatcher never believed in minimum wage when we started in 1981. British workers demanded for it. He said no, until there was a big riot, which was linked to wage poverty. So they started 1989. Yeah. The minimum wage, which we started 81. But
81.
Can we go and find out? They now have low pay commission. And in UK, they adjust minimum wage every year, April 1st of every year. The official foolery in UK is that they jack up wages for the working people. Not only that, they disaggregate it based on age. Those who are workers who are 21 years, youthful workers, they have a rate that is higher. I think I can't remember what the going rate looks like. And it's about 11 point something pounds per hour. It's per hour there. They also have for students. So here, we need to also make it regular.
Yes, that point.
The volatility in the, in the economy, in which exchange rate movement can rise. Now you keep wages, the minimum wage to be stagnant for 3 years. Meanwhile, inflation is every second. The currency fluctuation is every second. So you can't allow for flotation of exchange rate. And then you put freeze on wages. It doesn't make sense. So we need to think about that. But the one that is even of interest to me is living wage. Of course, for some of your members who are already in private sector, they pay more than this anyway. I've no doubt about that in private. Through the process of collective bargaining, wages are being negotiated every year. In fact, some twice in a year. When I was in textile, we are negotiating every year when textile was textile. So in summary, that's just my first quick intervention. All I want to say is that it's desirable, is the key out of income poverty. Because when you talk of Nigerians are living, there are about 133 or something, I don't know, million people who are living below poverty line. That's generalized. We should disagree that we are talking of working poor.
Yes,
people who are poor on account of working.
Yes.
I'm a DG now, and in nominal times, I know what I earn. But tell me, I'm poorer as a young worker when I was working. In return.
Thank you so much, sir. You've broken many legs and many tables.
So we cannot get out of this crisis of compensation until we pay working people very well.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Well done. In fact, you've, like I said, all the legs of the tables, you've broken them. First of all, I loved the history lessons you've given, where you told us that this is the 6th Minimum Wage Act that is being passed, you know, and of course 5 of them fell under the you know, democracy process. I liked also the part where you said, you know, where you have miserably paid working men and women, how do we get the best out of them? And I believe everyone is listening. The last one that was key for me, you know, is that CIPM should be front and center with, you know, wage-led economy recovery conversations. And I believe that's one of the things we're doing here. If you people did not hear, all of you on this call, I am now Comrade Kemi Shonubi. Today is the day of my induction. You are all welcome to my induction. Thank you very much.
You have to also live on minimum wage.
Don't worry, I'm going to. All right, sir. So while you were even speaking, somebody mentioned in the comment section, and that was very significant, that you know, Lagos State should even be commended and receive an award for it. So I'm going to Mrs. Busola. I'm coming to you, ma'am. And the question I have for you, madam, is should government determine and enforce minimum wage laws with private organizations? They've already said that Lagos State should win award for compliance. You know, I'm not the one that said it, it's people. And I believe even Kwara State too should also be celebrated. And yes, so I'm here. I've told them I'm supposed to call you Princess
Yeah,
Busola.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So should the government determine and enforce minimum wage laws with private organizations? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kemi. Number one, let me say thank you to Comrade Aremu for acknowledging Lagos State, and even you yourself. Thank you very much. We know that we're going to even do more very soon. Yes, to the question, yes. I say yes. Government has the authority to set minimum wage for both private and public sectors. Why this? This will ensure a baseline wage to protect workers from exploitation and guarantee fair compensation that can promote economic equity and social stability. Even though we know that it has to live on the principles of sustainability and affordability, it is government's role to ensure that it sets the minimum wage. What are the reasons for this? Number one, it protects workers from exploitation, like I said, because the minimum wage laws, as said by Comrade Issa Aremu, prevents businesses from underpaying workers, especially in industries where workers have limited bargaining power. The shop floor, the people on the shop floor, the workers on the shop floor hardly can talk most of the time, and they don't even know how to negotiate. Rather, they'll probably just want to down tools and strike. But when government sets it, it protects such workers. Now, number two, I would say that it promotes economic equity. What is this? By setting a minimum wage baseline, it helps reduce income inequality and ensures that a basic standard of living is set for all workers. It's now left to everyone to ensure that you live within your package. Saying cut your cloth, cut your coat according to your cloth.
According to your size. Yeah.
You know, not even to your size anymore, because you could be bigger than the 1 yard. So cut it to your cloth. You could decide to sew a camisole. You know, if you can't make a blouse, just sew a camisole or a monkey jacket, you know. So you must live within your means. Again, it encourages fair competition because uniform wage standards prevent businesses from gaining unfair advantage by paying extremely low wages. I know a lot of businesses that have tried to adjust themselves, you know, though it affects turnover. Some may decide that, oh, no, I can't take 6 lawyers. I'd rather do with 2 lawyers so that I can pay them handsomely and give them a living wage. And then by government setting the wage baseline, it boosts customer spending again. And when this purchasing power increases, it stimulates the economy by driving demand for goods and services. And when there's demand, higher demand for goods and services, you need more employees, more workforce. And again, what will I say now? It ensures social stability because the advantages wages, when you pay adequate wages, they can reduce poverty and social unrest, contributing to a more stable society. And of course, the government's responsibility is not only to set the wage, but also to ensure that businesses comply with it. Why? Because government wants to ensure that all the citizenry are well taken care of. Thank you. Let me stop there for now.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you, ma'am, Princess, for even keeping to time. I'm being very mindful of time now so that, because we have a lot of questions coming in. So I'm just going to quickly, there's another question I've merged, and I'm going to go to Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, because I don't think we've spoken about that. And this is coming from, the tech perspective. So with automation and technological advancements, how will the minimum wage evolve in the future? How do you see it evolving in the future with automation and technological advancement? That's the question, Dr. Tarfa. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. I did allude to it a bit, but let me take it further. So technology is usually brought in to drive efficiencies. So when you have an opportunity to replace humans with technology, then it means that, now this is the point, you will need, you're able to increase your productivity so that the pressure on your wages, because you're going to have to, when you increase your wages, it becomes more expensive for you. That efficiency when you invest in technology helps to replace or helps to generate the income that you need to cover for that expense. So what I'm saying in essence is this: I've increased my minimum wage, my cost has increased, but when I now invest in automation or technology, it's able to manage it. So most times, continuous increase in minimum wage drives the need for automation, even though companies are already thinking of automating most times. Now, but for those who cannot afford to automate, obviously what happens, their cost just keeps rising. But here's the thing: if that automation crosses a certain threshold, it will throw off. At that then you now have to let people go. So people now end up being left behind because the technology has replaced them. So that is the layman example I like to give, because I want the audience to follow us and understand. I don't want to throw in any big jargon on that. That is the primary dynamics associated with that. And because of time, I'd just like to leave that explanation to say that's how it works. So what's the conclusion? There are two things that have to happen. People that are being displaced will have to be upskilled and to do more productive stuff. But let me also say this: when automation comes, right, it also means that people now need to upskill to be able to operate those machines, or operate those as it were. Like, for instance, AI now is the thing that everyone is talking about, or is the new phenomenon. But the fact that there are now new learning areas, or the fact that AI makes some of us more productive. So there is a perfect harmony between man and machine that will not be achieved, but that's for only people who upskill. And that would lead me to say this, just in case, obviously I know I'll come back, but let me make this point. Obviously there are like distinguished Comrade had said, and I really love his history and point. There's a social area to it. The fact that if we increase minimum wage, we then need to reduce all these government interventions that we always have to do because people were earning better. And he gave example UK and so on. But I think for me, for those who understand the dynamic, is really around productivity. And productivity for me is education and upskilling in a way that people are able to contribute significantly to higher value items. There are some drivers that will tell you this is what they earn. Earn 180,000, 150, because the driver is clearly indispensable. The driver is so intelligent, he understands Google Maps, he can operate the bank, he can serve as an executive assistant. So the person has been significantly upskilled to reflect that. And I think as HR professionals are gathered on this call, that's an area that can be managed, because that is what helps to take away or reduce the implication on the bottom line. Full stop.
Awesome. Thank you so much for breaking it down as simply as you've done without using, as we call it, the jargons. And the summary of what I picked from you is people just need to upskill so that they do not get displaced by AI, by automation. This is one of the things we always say: AI is not here to take your jobs, but to enhance it. So at the end of the day, what we ask people to do is understand the extent of what automation can do and ensure that there is a harmony between man and machine. Now, there's another question that is for you and Princess, my Princess Busola Abidakun, who is also the PS. And I want you to start first before she contributes, and then I will now go to Comrade with my other question. What is the relationship between minimum wage laws and workforce productivity or morale? You touched on it briefly when you were talking or in my first question, but I want both of you to just speak to that now. What do you think? Most of us have an idea, but maybe just to reiterate it, what's the connection with workforce productivity and morale? So I'll start with you, Dr. Tarfa, before I go to Princess Olubusola.
All right. So because like obviously I would like, when the question is simple and straightforward, I will not take too much time than necessary so that we can have a productive conversation. So the answer is that obviously it's directly proportional. As the income, as the wages increase, people are more motivated to work harder, and so on and so forth. But also, I'm also, but let me now say something that is different, which is the issue of entitlements. And while a worker is entitled to his wages, there are other things that have had to happen. And I'm speaking now on part of employers. So we have a lot of employers that have actually invested in training and developing people because the quality of education was not up to par. So you have cases like manufacturing, or let's say garment making, for instance, where they actively took time to take people from nothing in terms of competencies and significantly upskill them. And based on that, this is what I could afford to pay you through that journey. Now you have cases where people now, at that point when minimum wage comes, they're not, trying to be entitled. Yes, I agree they can be entitled, but I also think this is my personal opinion. Like, I'm not saying a worker is not deserving of wages, but there's also a fair, I won't call it loyalty, but there's also an element of, hey, look at where my employer brought me from. And I think for me, that's one area we really need to pay attention to, because I already answered your first question. I just wanted to provide another perspective, which is that government needs to take into consideration that there are a lot of employers that, especially at the lower skill level, that are investing. I mean, I don't know of any organization or company in manufacturing or retail or even retail manufacturing, hospitality that do not significantly invest. The education they got cannot deliver anything. Even the ones that are graduates that went to school, we all know the challenges. So that balance, I think, is a very important conversation that we must have. And that is that how do we support employers? I know there is I forgot the name, but there's this other payment that we make every month that goes into industrial training fund. Exactly.
Industrial training fund.
In addition to, that is important, but just unlocking the opportunity for employers so that, if I invest in training an employee to get him up to speed, so that he's even, I pick my words carefully, so that the 70 or whatever amount I'm paying now makes sense. I also think that some consideration should be given. Full stop.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tarfa. Princess, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Tarfa. You said quite a lot. And I would just say that, of course, a fair minimum wage will always boost the morale of workers. Let me give, for instance, in Lagos State, we have the work from home policy between bands. Levels 1 to 14, they work from home twice, 2 days in a week, while levels 15 to 17 work from home once in a week. But then, with the increase in the minimum wage, we realize a dramatic morale boosting. With your timetable, someone like myself in my office, I know the timetable of those that will come, but I realize that they keep coming. And I will now say that I'm just supposed to work from home today. No, ma'am, I'd rather work from the office. They're happy. When you are paid fairly, your morale, your productivity is high. And then even my office, that we're in charge of the capacity development of Lagos State workforce, a lot of, just like Dr. Tarfa said, a lot of skilling and training and development has actually boosted the morale of people. And this formula actually added the moment minimum wage was increased, every one of them, of workers, felt good and they're ready to even give more. So the more the minimum wage or the living wage, like we call it in Lagos State, the more the morale will be boosted, and of course, productivity will be high. And that is why, if I'm to talk about teachers in Lagos State, you realize that for the past 4 years, the teachers of Lagos State have been getting the first place positions. They've been the best in Nigeria, the best in the states in Nigeria. And this, I can go on and on. We have the best students, because why?
Yeah.
Everything, you know, when the parents are happy
Yes.
with their minimum wage, it transcends to the children, the teachers are doing well, and the students are doing very well. So once again, I want to say thank you. And I want to even say thank you to Lagos State.
Thank you very much, Princess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Princess. Thank you so much. Like I said at the beginning of this session, if we continue, we'll be here till the end of the day. Everyone is dropping a lot of wisdom, a lot of nuggets. I see so many questions. I've tried my best to bundle the questions into the ones I've asked. There was a question I had for Comrade before, but when he was responding, he had already opened up the ideology or the narrative from policies, the history of how these were set. So I'm being mindful of time because we have other aspects before we round up. I would ask each one of you to quickly, what will be your closing statements? And I'll start with Comrade Issa first. What will be your closing statements? Then I'll go to Princess, then I'll go to Dr. Tarfa. So Comrade Issa, thank you. You have the floor.
Well,
1 minute, please, sir.
My brief closing statement will be linked to the last remark of the Princess, the Permanent Secretary from Lagos State, who I think also qualified to be called a comrade. Because if you are from a state that you are paying more than...
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I think it has to be linked. My last statement is that you can see the linkage between good pay and motivation for the workforce. The late John Paul II says that, you know, a just wage, a just salary for the worker is the, you know, ultimate test to show that an economy is working very well. And you can see the fact that after that good pay, workers could come to work rather than prefer to be at home as remote workers. For obvious reasons, they cannot pay for transport. They can meet certain minimum costs of movement, which is quite commendable. So it means we should continue that conversation. I also raised one point, and I think, let me quickly wrap up this, that we need to also reward, you know, employers, you know, that have commitment to decent work. And that's what we do at the National Institute for Labor Studies. You know, my institute is named after #1 labor man who spent all his life to fight for decent work. The #1 labor man is Michael Imoudu. You know, he lived between 1902 and 2005. You know, almost 103 years. You know, it's part of the struggle that he waged. So we have what we call fellowship, you know, and I can announce on this platform, you know, as DG, that we are moving to the new set to really reward and give fellowship to those states, to those governors, to employers
that do well.
who are committed to decent work, in wage. And Lagos will be on our topics. Your current president, your president of CIPM, you know, we decorated him, you know, given his track record of the struggle for decent work over the years. That's Malan Lada Gubiri. My very good.
Sir.
Then the last one, I think Tafa raised very good point, the linkage between pay and productivity. I don't want to sound as if I'm just being romantic about workers' pay. Minimum pay must go with minimum productivity, you know, and I think because for sustainable pay, there should be sustainable productivity, you know, and I think PS, we all work together with that. As we pay more, I'm happy they are coming to work. But in the public service, what I've seen at the federal level, the day you pay more, the day they collect salaries, when they don't go, some of them don't come to work. You know, so we must also link the issue of pay.
Pay and motivation.
We need to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Issa. So grateful. Princess, a quick closing comment from you. Very quick. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I will say that in conclusion, the issue of fair minimum wage is not just an economic debate, but a moral imperative. A fair minimum wage ensures that hardworking individuals talents that we have wherever we may have them, can meet their basic needs, contribute meaningfully to the society, and support economic growth. It is a critical step towards reducing inequality and fostering social cohesion. I would say that we must remain positive and prioritize policies that reflect equity and fairness. And I would say that the private sector too, they should please ensure that workers are properly taken care of, they are and rewarded, just like Comrade Aremu said. We should the conversation should continue so that everybody, all workers, will be happy and be more productive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Princess. So grateful for your contributions. My dear PS, Dr. Tarfa, can I have your final comments, sir?
All right, thank you very much. I have spoken, like I said, quite extensively about things I've been asked directly, but I'd like to use the opportunity to thank the CIPM for having us come and participate here. I consider it a significant privilege. You are the CIPM is a member of the establishment, so that's where these things are determined. But I would just say this in closing. In as much as we are working hard to help young professionals start and build their careers, which is what I'm focused on, Nigeria is at a point where we must really, and that's what I'm spending the rest of my career doing, helping people to build competencies. I think as the conversation, and it's like I'm a really broken record, but I want to just give another color to that, which is that as we are pushing for just increasing in wages, we should also advise and recommend and support so that people know that if you want your wages to go up, once you're more productive, once you're more competent, once you're more skilled, you can get that done. I mean, my mentor was trying to renovate his house in UK, and he told me that. So I just asked him a few weeks later after he told me, I said, how's it going with your house in UK with renovation of your bathroom? And he says, well, until 2025. Why? There are no plumbers. All of them are busy, and I'm on a waiting list. When you hear that, you understand that, okay, productivity. Most of the people in our artisan, not artisan, they are from Cotonou, Togo. I mean, in fact, if it's the Nigerian masons, these are the issues, right? So you can't hire someone and just go to sleep and say, no, I'll get the job done. So there's a huge element of, as productivity begins to rise, GDP will increase, and your GDP increases, we can afford, pay more people. So it's just, I mean, for me, I understand the fact that labor has to fight for people, because otherwise, if you don't fight, you won't collect. You have to take. I believe in that.
Yes.
Suffered violence, take it by force, and so on. But there is also a huge proportion that can be driven just by value, which is what the capitalist system rewards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, my wonderful panel members. You've done justice. In fact, I think you've gone over and beyond. Comrade Issa Aremu, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, Princess Olubusola Abidakun, you have broken the legs, you have created structure, you've given us answers. Many people want me to answer or, read out their questions, but we can't take it because of time. Please give them a virtual huge clap, bring out your drums and everything. While you're doing that, we have just dropped, the team has dropped the evaluation sheet. We would appreciate that we have responses from everyone, basically to ensure that CIPM can serve you better in follow-up types of sessions like this. How do we ensure that we do more, do better? We're leading the conversation. Thank you so much. Yes, top-notch panelists. If you're reading the comments like I'm reading, you can see that the claps is quite a lot, and we're really grateful to the leadership team for leading this conversation. The next thing on the agenda, because I'm being very mindful of time, and I am sure that we're going to finish spot on too, we would now have announcements by the registrar and chief executive, Ms. Oluwakemi, FCIPM. Please, I know that we're saying thank you. Please respond to the evaluation sheet in the chat section, chat box, chat room. Yes, Ms. Oluwakemi, FCIPM, who is the registrar and chief executive of CIPM, will come on now for some announcements. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Kemi. Thank you to all our panelists, but I'll leave that to the vote of thanks. Mine is very easy. It's to update us on programs that we have coming up at the Institute and some activities that we have lined up for our members and non-members alike as we draw to the end of the year. The first one is in regard to ready to market. We have an internship scheme within the Institute and would like to ask and request for organizations to take on our trained interns. So we have a lot of interns that have been trained. They're ready for placement for a year. So please, if you'd like to be part of that, please send us an email, readytomarket@cipmnigeria.org, johnmote@cipmnigeria.org, and we have a telephone number as well coming up, +234 803 929 3252. We have trained interns. You would not regret taking on this HR professionals that have been trained, tested by CIPM. We also have very exciting news, and I think we should get the drum roll out, as CIPM USA branch inauguration. CIPM USA branch inauguration. We're starting the CIPM branch in the US. The inauguration is on Saturday, 14th of December, 2024, 3 p.m. West African time. I think everyone should be excited, maybe for those that want to jackpot. Or for some of us that want to jackpot, maybe. So please join us. We've been circulating information on that. Please join the President and Chairman of the Governing Council and the entire leadership and the Governing Council as the CIPM USA branch gets inaugurated. We also have the Southeast Public Lecture coming up on Friday, 13th December 2024. It's a free event. We do lots of freebies in CIPM. Lots of freebies to develop our members, to enhance the capacity of our members, and even non-members alike, to build your knowledge so that you're able to contribute effectively to the bottom line of your organizations. So we're going to keep doing this to show you the value that CIPM delivers to its members. After all, our strapline says, CIPM, we deliver value through people. So please join us at the Southeast Public Lecture on Friday, 13th December 2024 at 10 a.m. West African time. Again, we'll circulate the link for you to join us. And the topic is navigating the complexity of human resource in Nigeria and optimizing HR operations. And this is courtesy of all our branches domiciled in the Southeast zone of the nation. So we have an interesting one for you. Please join us. On Thursdays, we still have the office running. That's the CIPM office program. It's called or titled The Office, and is on Lagos Talks 91.3 FM, Thursday, 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Please join us. Another opportunity for you to learn, relearn, unlearn, and keep learning. And there you go. The one for Wednesday, sorry, today is Tuesday. Thursday is already displayed for you. And building agile themes. That's the theme for the topic on The Office, Lagos Talks 91.3 FM. Please join us. It's an interactive session as well. You can call in with your questions, and we look forward to welcoming you. A reminder surrounding the CIPM, CIPD, mutual recognition agreement that was signed in September. Application process, the guidelines, how you can become a CIPD member by virtue of the mutual recognition agreement is all on our website. Applications are being taken now But please remember, you need to be financially active with CIPM. You need to have a valid license to be able to make your application. So please, we expect that you're also making your application for this as we continue to work on the other mutual recognition with Canada and most likely now the USA. We also have coming up NECA in collaboration with CIPM presents CEO's Discourse 2025 in View, Budget, Taxation, and Regulations, an online program on Tuesday, 17th of December, 2024, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Again, I think we can't say this enough. You would see and you would know it's evident. We are a learning organization. I mean, in the space of 2 weeks, we have about 4 programs lined up for you. How good, how brilliant, how excellent can CIPM be? And I think our leadership deserve a resounding round of applause. As we come up to the end of the year, we're trying to ensure that you're empowered for 2025 and you're ready to take on whatever 2025 is going to bring in terms of being able to support the organizations that you work with. We also have at the moment going out, and we've been sending that out. We'd like to know how you think we're doing as your institute. We have a CIPM customer satisfaction survey that is currently out. Your opinion matters to us. We want to continue to improve on the service that we're delivering to you as CIPM. So please, would appreciate if you can actually complete the customer satisfaction survey as is shared, so we can ensure that we continue and we're continuously improving on the service that we deliver to you. The last but not the least, we have our CIPM exams for our registered students. So, okay, the link for the survey is there. We also have a CIPM exams coming up this Friday and Saturday, 13th and 14th of December. So if you have registered as a student member for the exams, please be reminded. Your exams are on the 13th and 14th of December 2024. If there are any issues regarding your registration, we have your cord groups, we have your Telegram groups. Please drop your concerns, drop any matters there so we can attend to them. Thank you very much. Over to you, MC.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for the announcement. Okay.
Sorry. CIPM continues to expand. We have our 61st induction ceremony coming up in Abia on Wednesday, 18th of December, 2024. Our 61st induction ceremony. Wednesday, 18th of December, 2024. We'll share the link. Please join us online as we induct over 200 new members into CIPM. Your institute is doing so well. And I think, again, the leadership, the governing council, and all the entire members, you all deserve a resounding round of applause for all that you're doing. We also still have the UTIVA partnership ongoing as well. We'll drop that on the platform, the UTIVA partnership. Please sign up. Training programs, 2,000 females in the tech world. Please sign up, share the link. CIPM is in collaboration with UTIVA to develop and train women in the tech field. So please, we expect that you're going to do that. We'll drop that on the link for you in the platform. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. Grateful. Thank you for the announcement. Well done. We're going now to the closing remarks by the Vice President, CIPM, Mrs. Chidinma Obiajesi, FCIPM. Mrs. Chidinma, over to you for the closing remarks. Thank you very much. While she's getting ready, please remember that the evaluation sheet, the satisfaction survey has been deployed. We would appreciate that everyone who attended this session takes less than 2 minutes to fill it out. Mrs. Chidinma, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, our own Oluwakemi Shonubi. Good afternoon, everyone, once more. Our President, Malam Ladan Ahmed Gobre, kindly permit me to rest on already established protocol. Distinguished colleagues, I would say it's been an exciting conversation so far. At this 2024 annual public lecture holding today, 6th December, with the topic, the new national minimum wage, implication for public and private organizations. When the president started his opening remark, he said something. He said, if we think that conversations around wage would be dry, this time we are going to bring the heat and also the humor. And indeed, that is what has just happened. We did not just bring the heat here. I can say in the past 2 hours, we also have had the humor. We have had hard conversations. But interestingly, we have enjoyed ourselves. The over 1,000 participants we have here. Meanwhile, can we clap for ourselves? That's the first time CIPM is hitting 1,000 participants on a webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. Kemi also said something. She said the keynote speaker took us through a masterclass. I want to say Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD, that was a masterclass. He did not just take us through the theories, he also took us through the argument for and against. He took us through the inferences. In fact, for the first time, I never thought about it that government would also benefit for increased wage. And I'm sure that all of us that logged on to this call today have been thoroughly educated. Our skill when it comes to understanding the minimum wage have been honed today. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate that. And like someone said, you never disappoint. So even this time, you did not disappoint at all. Or do I say you did not fall our hand at all? Thank you very much, sir. And for the panelists, going from our own comrade, Issa Aremu, MNI, Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, and Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, MCIPM, we all took every one of us through various aspects of this minimum wage. Our comrades, as usual, are taking us through history. And like Shonubi said, we all took copious notes of how this minimum wage have come through, even up to this 6th edition. And I think we are lucky, sir, to know that our president was also educating us here that we were on the 4th panel, on the 4th tripartite panel for the minimum wage. And our president was on the 5th. So here we are talking about the 6th. So what a wonderful time we've had learning. And thank you, sir, for saying that no economy will grow by having miserably paid working men and women. I had to note that down. That sounded quite interesting to me. And you were apt on that. We all need to pay well to grow. And for my colleague, Mrs. Abidakun, I noticed also that you linked minimum wage to employee morale, which also boosts productivity. And our own Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, talking about honing skills and increasing productivity for the young ones. We have learned so much today. And sitting down here, whilst we argue in favor of the minimum wage and how implications and why we need to take it, why it shouldn't be regional, but should be national. I sit down here as someone who sits on the table when organizations begin to discuss how they navigate the daily operational wage. And I begin to wonder, should the next conversation not be about how to bring stakeholders to begin to look for buffers on how to help organizations cushion the effect of the increasing costs? Because while they were still grappling with the increasing cost of daily operation, in my industry, we run diesel 24/7. If that has increased astronomically, aside from other cost of living and cost of doing business, and they also now have to grapple with minimum wage that has increased by over 133%. That is something that calls for concern. So while I'm thinking of that, my charge to all of us here is that we have learned today. I'm sure we are clearer and we are able to navigate the complexities of applying this minimum wage. Let's go out there as we round up 2024 and face 2025. As we have that conversation around budget, around new strategies for the new year, it's also time to put certain things into consideration. Our keynote speaker here mentioned productivity. While the cost is being increased, it's also important that we work around how to get the employees to increase the level of productivity so that organizations can be sustainable, so that organizations can also thrive in this economy. We would also need to begin to have those transparent conversations around affordability and ability to pay, which was mentioned by the keynote speaker. Because also, we would not want the organization to begin to shut down. We would begin to have that conversation and put into consideration whatever we are proposing. Is it sustainable? Can the organization really sustain that payment? And then finally, is it fair? So also we do not strangle the economy, because if organizations begin to shut down, unemployment will increase. Our economy too will be worse off for it than it is now. Having said that, I want to say on behalf of the President and Chairman of Council, as we go out there, we will begin to apply the knowledge we have gained today. And I appreciate all our keynote speaker. It is not my position to say the vote of thanks. I'll leave that for the rightful person to do that. But I must say that we should also begin to consider having these conversations in-house and see how we can navigate and get out of the issue, out of the quagmire we have found ourselves, which includes applying the new minimum wage in the midst of our economic reality. Thank you very much, sir. I will hand over to the MC. Thank you. Kemi.
Thank you very much, Ma. My able Vice President, Mrs. Chidima Obiajesi. Thank you so much for giving us your closing remarks. I will go swiftly to Mrs. Abisola Dokumu Adegbite, MCIPM, who is the Chairman, Institutional Development Committee, CIPM, who will give us the vote of thanks as we round up. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Kemi. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you very much, Kemi. Wonderful job you've done already. I'd like to say thank you to the President and Chairman of Governing Council, Malam Hamed Ladan Gobir, FCIPM, FNILI, the Vice President, Mrs. Chidima Obiajesi, FCIPM, the National Treasurer, Mrs. 𝐍𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧𝐚𝐥, FCIPM, the Registrar and Chief Executive, Ms. Oluwatoyin, FCIPM, the immediate past President, Mr. Olusegun-Mojeed, FCIPM, FNLI. To the esteemed and elected and other council members, I'd like to say thank you as well. Distinguished fellows, revered distinguished fellows on this call, I say a big thank you. To our keynote speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB, FIOD. Most grateful to you, sir. Thank you so very much. The esteemed panelist, Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, NPOM, Mrs. Princess, Mrs. Olubusola, Ajibola Abidakun. MCIPM, PSLC, FITD, CMIOD, FIMC. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa, most grateful. Thank you very much, sir. The moderator, Mrs. Oluwakemi Shonubi. Oh, sorry, Comrade Kemi Shonubi.
Comrade, yes, Comrade.
Comrade Kemi Shonubi, yes. MCIPM, thank you so much. The moderator already said that. Institutional Development Committee members, thank you so much. You know I absolutely love you all. You know that. Thank you so much. Members of the Institute, non-CIPM members and colleagues, gentlemen of the press. Our first appreciation goes to the Almighty God who made today possible. And then to the leadership of the Institute for the trust in and support of the committee to hold this year's public lecture successfully. We say thank you. To the keynote speaker, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, FCIB FIOD. Wow, you opened our eyes to a lot. Thank you so much, sir. The session was insightful, enlightening, and refreshing. To our resourceful panelists, I already mentioned the names, but I'll just go over them again. Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, Mrs. Olubusola Abidakun, MCIPM, and Dr. Emmanuel Tarfa. Thank you so much. And to the moderator, Kemi Shonubi, MCIPM, thank you. Your pungent and practical application, analysis, and response to the questions were fantastic. And for making time out of your very busy schedules, we do appreciate you. To all participants, for making time out to join and for your active participation. I'm looking at the figures of people still online, and I'm in awe of the number of people. And that we hit the 1,000 mark, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. To CIPM branch and chapter chairman, thank you so much. Even your WhatsApp platform has been on fire since the beginning of the program, so you know that we noticed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You mobilized your members to join, and we do appreciate you and hope we can still continue to count on you, Chairman. The Institutional Development Committee members whose commitment and sacrifice made this lecture a success. You guys know we have our karaoke coming up, but don't let's loud it here so we don't have to invite other people. And like I said before, I love you so much and I love you much more. So we meet again on Friday. Thank you. To the HQ staff for your untiring commitment to the success of the program, I absolutely must say thank you. Even back end here, as this was going on, I saw all that was going on and really do appreciate you. We couldn't have done this without you. To all and any other persons, too many to be mentioned here, we appreciate you and thank you. We look forward to your support for subsequent programs, and I know we can count on you. Thank you once again, and let me be the first to wish you a Merry Christmas in advance and a prosperous 2025 coming soon. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my able chairman. I'm also a member of that committee, so I'm getting ready for the karaoke. Thank you very much. I think you've done a fantastic job in rounding off, and we can end today's session. Thank you very much, everyone, for giving us an opportunity.
National anthem, last stanza.
Okay. All right, so we would end by singing the national anthem, the last stanza.
Last stanza.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, everyone. This is Comrade Kemi Shonubi signing out on behalf of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining and contributing and sharing your questions and thoughts. Have a beautiful day. Well
Thank you,
done.
Femi. Thank you, Kemi. Well done. Well done. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President. Bees,
Thank
bees,
you.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
bees,
Thank you.
bees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, everybody. Comrade Kemi, let's meet on the negotiating table.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, ma'am. All right.
Bye.
Goodbye, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Bye.